We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that, and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that, and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay in line with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
IMHO Talk Show. You already know what it is. Sir Charles in the booth in the building. One more again to give you the good news as always, and we are joined by none other to help set off this show than Miss Kalila Jones. How you feeling?
I am well.
Good stuff, good stuff. And it's another IMHO Talk Show, and it's Solar Seville season. So happy to be able to set this one off with you today. IMHO Talk Show online, everybody. So tell a friend, 'cause we got the good word coming right about now from our good sister. So it's something you definitely don't want to miss. Solar Seville 2025.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right. Oh, right. So yet another year of a festival that's for us, by us, dare I say.
Yes. Please say.
Yeah, yes, indeed. So this year coming up, tell us why another year of Solar Seville? Like, what's new this year in particular? Just kind of give us. Let's start with that stump speech.
Well,
let's start with your stump.
First and foremost, why not?
Why
Because
not?
why not? That's
that.
why. Also, this is a pivotal year for us because it is the 5th year, which is a milestone for us. So I have to say, I can't believe it's been 5 years.
Right.
We've been doing this together for 5 years. People have been showing up, and the reason, to answer your question, the reason why it's so important is because people showing up consistently for 5 years, all the artists, the attendees, the vendors, the sponsors, everyone, the volunteers, everyone who made it happen, it is an intentional act of Black joy.
That's right.
As resistance. And to do that collectively, that is why this is important. It matters. It matters for our kids. It's representation for our kids. We have other festivals in town, but this is for, by, and about us, and that's why it's important.
Love it, love it, love it. And this year, when will it be held this year? What's the dates and location?
So with this being the 5th year, we want to do it big. So we are doing a week-long festival this year, August 10th through August 17th. I'm going to let you get you a pen and jot that down. Save those dates in your calendar, August 10th through August 17th. We got something for everybody during that week. Things are a little different this year. Like I said, it's a week-long festival. We always do what we can to do free or as low-cost programming for families and children. But then we also have some grown and sexy stuff for the people too, so y'all can get outside with us. So we got a few of those events too, and we can get into more details about what those are if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that it being all around town? Yeah, I guess I'll start there.
Okay.
So like if you want to lay out like some of the programming of maybe what you're so excited for this year, because I gotta imagine, for one, like you love the community, the people that are part of it love the community, and so you have that joy of it. But to come back for yet another year, 5 years, right?
Yes.
5th year. So so I know that there has to be things that stand out to you, or like each year you'd be like, oh, we got to do that again, or either for this year, like let's add this to it. So when you look at this year's programming, like what's some highlights to you already?
Well, I will say, quiet as it's kept, loud as I'ma tell it. My team is probably like, she is the most insane person ever, because I always have so many ideas, and I'm glad that I have a team that is rational, and sometimes they can rein me back in, like, okay, maybe in year 2035, but not this year. It's not logical. But I'm always super excited to just bring something for the people, and to bring them out. And so I don't know that there's one event that I'm more excited about than the other, but I will say collaborating with different organizations that are Black-led or center the Black community, that has been a treat for me. Okay. If I had to choose one, I would say, of course, Best in Black. I'm super excited about that because I love giving people their flowers, and I love seeing other people give people their flowers. There's that feeling's unmatched. But working with Black Women Who Wine, this year we are collaborating on a trap karaoke event where we will be doing some curated wine pairings with Tasha from Black Women Who Wine.
Wait a minute, so Black Women Who Wine, so the brothers can't come?
Yeah, y'all can come.
Okay.
100%. You better come.
Just want a little clarification.
But I am excited about that collaboration because, and I talk to her about this all the time, because I'm not a wine drinker, but every time I see all the wine events, I'm like, they look like they a vibe, like a whole vibe. Like, how can I get involved? So I think she was the first organization that I reached out to say, hey, are you interested in doing something with us this year? And we've been working on that. So I'm super excited about that. I know one of the Best in Black Seaville nominees, Chef G, shout out to him. Yeah. He is actually going to be doing some curated bites for us during that particular event. So excited about those two collaborations in particular, because those are two people that I had not worked with before. And I also just trap karaoke. It just it's very much given a vibe. And also as a part of that event, it won't be like a super formal thing, but we will also be kind of acknowledging some of the Black women change makers here in Charlottesville. So it's just an opportunity for those women who are leading things and taking on a lot to take a load off. Come get on stage, live your best Beyonce moment, and have some wine and some good food. So I think that's, if there were one event that I was supposed to choose this year, that would be one that I'm very excited about.
That's dope. Speaking of Beyonce, man, I'm going to digress because I got like a little ADHD or something. Did you see that Cadillac leaning? Have you seen the video yet of her at the concert in the Cadillac? You know how she come down from the rafters?
Yes.
Yeah, it was leaning. Everybody was like, oh, Lord, somebody about to get fired. Don't worry, Clara. When you come down on your Cadillac, we're going to keep it level. We ain't going to let you fall.
Okay, mine's got to be level. Just maybe some hydraulics once it's on the ground, but they don't got to come out.
Yes, indeed. So we are talking to none other than Kalila Jones, Miss Chic and Classy Consulting herself. Sola Seaville at X Park yet another year. And got a week of festivities, October 10th through 17th, whole week of programming, and so y'all definitely stay tuned and stay engaged. So as far as folks, so you mentioned a little bit about what they can expect as far as coming out to, but now like how do these events differ when it comes to participation? Like, are there any ticketed events? Anything people need to jump on in advance?
Yes.
Just show up.
So 100%. So just some of the behind the scenes logistics that people just may not know about. Like I said, it's I mean, when I say I'm very, very awestruck that it's the 5th year, I really am, because we've done a lot of this without a budget for most of the time, right? So that first year, that was no budget. It was like planned in a month, and to be able to grow progressively each year is a amazing thing to see. Doing some of the, like I said, the behind the scenes things that people just don't know about is how we get the funding, how you get sponsorships, how you get grants. I wrote grants till they were coming out of my eyes, okay? Writing grants, doing a lot of networking, getting sponsorships and whatnot. But things are different this year because, like I said, I was very adamant, and the team was very adamant that we wanted our programming for the families to be free.
Okay, that's awesome.
That is
that's
hard to do.
Yeah,
hard to
right.
do. We have 3 events this year for families that are free. Free 99. Okay, all I'm asking you to do, you will need to register and sign a waiver. We have Soul Skate. Of course, we need a waiver for that. We're going to have Soul Skate. That's for the families. It's free. We will also have, of course, Solar Seaville Saturday. That is always free. And then we will have a end of summer swim, foam party, and a car show, which will be at Washington Park on August the 17th, also free.
Okay.
It's not easy to get these venues. It's not easy to get these any of these things to be able to do for free. So that's why we do have programming that there is a cost for. And so those events will be, and actually we do have one other event that's free. It's the Soul Cafe Blacks in Tech Mixer.
Okay.
That will be free as well, even though that's for blacks who work in the tech industry. And then, so the other events that we have, we will have line dancing with Caesar. Shout out to him. He is doing amazing things, and I'm very excited to work with him as well. This is going to be an Afro beats and carnival fusion kind of line dancing. So everybody and their grandma is line dancer right now. We get that. I wanted to do a different theme. No shade to any of the other themes, but by the time August comes, people gonna be booted out, cowboyed out, all of that. So I want
fans gonna be broke.
Yeah, I want to do something a little different. So that's what that line dancing event is gonna be, and that's gonna be. I believe the early bird ticket is like $10. And then after that, it'll be $15. So that event, and then, like I said, the trap karaoke, that will be, I believe, the early bird cost is $25 with $30 after, and that includes a glass of wine. It includes your food, and it includes your experience with the karaoke. There'll also be a cash bar, and we're working on some wine flights too for those who dig that. And then we have the Best in Black Seville. So Best in Black Seville is probably our premier event. This is our 2nd year planning this with Vinegar Hill. Last year it was so well received. I couldn't have asked for a better outcome. The only thing that I would have asked for is a bigger venue. And guess what, baby, we got a bigger venue.
Hey, look at God.
So we are
what's up.
at the Paramount this year. And that's going to be on August the 15th. We will be doing early bird pricing for that. That will go live on the Paramount website on Tuesday. And actually, that's kind of our delay in putting the full lineup out, is because I want people to be able to get all their tickets and see the full lineup at one time. So that will be out July 1st, which is this Tuesday. Please keep an eye out for that. You don't want to miss it. And the exciting thing about Best in Black this year is, one, that it's at the Paramount. And Paramount kind of reached out to us saying this should have been here. So excited about that. The other big thing is that United Way is our marquee sponsor for that event.
Shouts out to
Very
them.
excited to have Minority Business Alliance as well as Black Professional Network, which Black Professional Network will be our the VIP reception sponsor. So you don't want to miss any of that. And a huge part that's different this year about Best in Black is that we are announcing the winners live. We did not do that last year because we could not because of the venue space. We had to make sure that we had our winners in the spot, so we had to tell them in advance. This year we are not doing that.
Yeah, okay. So you're saying live from the event, but they still won't know in advance.
They will not know in advance. Yes, you will know when we call your name. So that's a different piece. Oh, and I lied. My favorite part about Best in Black this year is that our fashion show, the adult fashion show that we normally do on Saturday at Soul of Seaville, we are actually bringing that to the stage for Best in Black. So to be able to see that fashion show, you will want to be at Best in Black this year. Now, that's not to say that we're not bringing a little piece of fashion to Saturday too, because I'm working with D9 to put on a D9 fashion show, a little pop-up fashion show there, and as well as our youth who always bring it. They will be in-house on Saturday as well. So you won't miss out, but if you want to see the adult fashion show, you will want to make sure that you come to Best in Black. And I think y'all will be very excited about the speaker that we have this year too.
At the awards?
Yes.
Speaker at the awards. Okay,
Yes.
Okay, I see you keeping some things under your hat. I see. Look, I'm not gonna pry.
Just a few little teasers in there, but you absolutely, and I say it all the time, you don't want to miss it, but you really don't want to miss it. I promise you will not be disappointed.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I noticed you said some things that involve different sort of demographics, shall I say, but also on the site, it says free and for all ages. Now, are there certain events that are more catered to the adults or more catered to the family unit that you can kind of highlight for folks?
So Saturday is free and for all ages. That's more like the family reunion vibes with 2,000 of your favorite cousins. The events that are more geared towards adults would be the trap karaoke, the line dancing, which you could, if your kid is into dancing, you could do that. There will be an open bar and things like that, but those events are more geared towards adults. And then there's the after party. Of course, that's for adults as well. But I tried to even it out. So we got the Soul Skate, which is family friendly. We got the End of Summer Swim, which is family friendly, and then as well as Soul of Seaville Saturday.
Nice, awesome. And will the programming be posted online anywhere?
Yes, on Tuesday.
Okay.
Yep, 100%. Right on. You will want to visit ixartpark.org/soul/of/Seaville.org.
Gotcha. Good stuff. This is dope. And then for like your vendors and sponsors and folks saying, you know what, I still want to try to support that. I want to make sure this programming stays free. Why
are you shucking and jiving? Go ahead and hit me up.
So just hit you up. Like
yes, or you can
sponsors?
visit that same website. There's a vendor application there, or you can email. I said hit me up, but just kidding. No, don't hit me up. Go ahead and email soulofseaville@gmail.com. We are so it's grown so much. We literally went from like 10 vendors our first year to always having a wait list and having 50 vendors. So we cannot accept everyone. And initially, like we accepted who came. Now we have to vet them. So please put in an application. Our vendor manager will, once we have everything in there, our team will get together and we'll say, oh, okay, we have 2 of these or 3 of these or this, let's give them an opportunity. And then we will let you know, give you vendor spots and things like that. So please get your application in if you have not already. And I am not the plug on that. So reach out to me and say, can I please get in? Because I'm not, that's not my ministry.
Yeah. Take the designated avenues, ladies and
yes,
gentlemen.
Please.
She said, xpark.org/SoulofSeaville. Once again, heading it up, it's you and Jams and Beyond Fitness with Sabrina, right? So before we let you go, let us talk a little bit about like just that unison of Soul of Seville, right? Of thinking about like who's in charge of it, and thinking about how this festival is set apart. You know what I mean? And because that may go into the programming, right?
Right.
Like Soul of Seville, what makes this worth another 5 years?
Right.
You feel what I'm saying?
And
like what makes this set apart and for our community, shows the soul of our community.
I mean, when you say who's in charge, the people are in charge. Like that we center the community in everything that we do. So I mean, yes, we've been meeting, every month since the month after Soul of Seville last year. However, all of this is for, by, and about us, all of us, guided by us. I feel like there's been a little of a resurgence, it seems to me, where people are outside, we're doing different things, a lot of creative things, and I'm loving that. And I think that Soul of Seville is kind of just riding that wave as well, just seeing what the people are responding to, what it is that they're wanting, and trying to give that, and not just as a place to kiki and eat and have fun, but to also to help with economic development. We help to support 50 businesses during Soul of Seville Saturday alone, but now with Best in Black Seville, last year we gave away over 50 awards to businesses that are people choice. That's another thing for people to understand, is anybody that's any category and any business or person, influencer that is on that, those are people's choice. We had nothing to do with that. I didn't choose any of those people. The community did. And so it's something for people to really be proud of. And I'm proud that so many people, at the last check, I think we had 2,000 votes in already, and we just released that just recently. So excited to see that. And also the Let's Intentionally Thrive Scholarship, which is something that I launched the third year. Very excited about that, because we'll be able to give away more scholarships this year. That is going to, the application window is about to open on July 15th through August the 1st, so please keep an eye out for that as well.
When you talk about how much people play, the people in the city of Charlottesville, our Black community, play in the role of what is, Soul of Seville, I don't know if you've ever really been given an opportunity, especially here on the show, to talk about the name of the organization. Here's the correlation I was drawing as you were talking, because you can find Soul of whatever all across the country, right? But we're here in Charlottesville, and this thing is called Soul of Seville, and the soul, right, of something. It's like the heartbeat of it. It's the thing that gives it life, right? Keeps it vibrant. And so all these things were kind of running around in my mind, especially as you were talking about people who play such a significant role in making this what it is.
Yes, 100%.
Did that all go into the
yes,
process?
so let me say that I'm so glad that you said that. No one ever really asked me that question ever. We were thinking, just like what's something, what can we call this that really speaks to people, and they understand, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. That's where I need to be. I am a military spouse, and I've moved all around. And when I moved here, shortly before, August 12th and all those things happened, I really was like, where do people do? Like, where are my people? Like, I don't know what to do. And in my mind, I'm like, where's the soul? Where are my people? Where can I feel connected? And so I wanted a title that kind of embodied that for people so that they understood, like, if you're missing a piece of your soul, this is where you need to be this weekend. Like, that's where you need to be. So yes, the 100%, that's for me was what was missing for me personally. And I wanted to really grab people with that, saying, hey, by no means, by no stretch of the imagination am I saying, me as an outsider, that I know what the soul of Seaville is. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is I want y'all to show me what it is, and please come and show me and be that with me and embrace us all together, and so that it was a collective thing. So yes, and I appreciate that question because nobody has ever asked before.
You know what? That's a great segue. Like, can we take a break and can you join us for the Ask Max? Because we got to Ask Max. Okay. By the way, like that fits into that. Mm-hmm. If that's cool with you, you mind joining that conversation with us for the end of the hour?
Sure.
That's awesome. So, but to make sure that everybody knows what's up with Soul of Seaville, don't want to divert from that too quickly and too drastically. So Kalila, before we go to break, go ahead and give your sort of closing word on this year, which you want the people to walk away remembering about Soul of Seaville, August 10th through 17th, 2025. The fifth year, Kalila. The fifth year.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Every year I'm like, well, that's crazy. First, I did want to say one of our partners for the car show that I'm working with is Dream Clothing with Jamar. Shout out to him because he does so much and brings the city out. Prospect Day is coming up, and I'm thinking of that because there are a lot of silos sometimes that happen here. I think it could be because it's such a small town and people just don't know what each other is doing. We moved the date of Soul of Seaville several years because of other programming that was going around. We understand that anything that's going on for the community, for our community, is for the greater good. It's for all of us.
That's right.
So we want people to be able to attend everything. Anyway, Prospect Day was one that we kind of worked around because they do theirs every year. He is sponsoring that, really working hard on that. I believe it's July the 12th, I want to say.
Yes.
They are looking for a couple of more sponsors. So please hit up Jamar if you are able to. And if not, please just show up for that.
That is July 12th, Forest Hills Park.
Yes.
From 3 to 7.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Hold on. Is that right? Did I get the wrong one? I'll make sure I get the right one because I got a bunch of the Prospect days that popped up on my phone real quick.
I believe it's July 12th.
It definitely is July 12th. I want to make sure I had the right time.
And they're looking for a couple more sponsors. They've almost reached their goal. So I just wanted to shout out them because he's always so supportive.
Absolutely.
But as far as Soul of Seaville, please keep an eye out for the full schedule. That'll go out July the 12th. I did want to mention that there are 2 satellite events that you will need to get those tickets separately. You won't be able to get them at the same spot, so I want to mention that. Best in Black Seaville, you need to go to the Paramount website. But you'll want to check out the X Art Park website for the full lineup and to get tickets for that. And then the after party, those tickets will be sold available only at the door. But all the other things, you can get the information on xartpark.org. That'll go live July the 1st, which is Tuesday.
Awesome. Good stuff. Soul of Seaville. And like, since you mentioned the soul and you described it that way, something else popped in my mind is that even today, folks, so after you're done listening to the IMHO talk show, they can head on down to Booker T. Washington Park.
Yes.
So my friend Juanica, in partnership with Prolific and City of Promise and the city as well, doing tweens and teens.
Yes.
And this is for city children, right? City school children specifically, because that's that's part of the prerequisite by working with the city Parks and Rec in the city of Charlottesville. So tweens and teens midsummer break party in the park today, 3 to 6 over at Washington Park. This is a free event for youth 12 to 17 years old. A lot of good activities
Yes,
going on over there.
please show up.
That's
Please
what we
show up
talk about,
because we
the
haven't
soul.
had anything
Yeah.
for our kids for such a long time. So now that we do, please make sure that you're showing up for them. And I want to shout out the city as well, because getting a couple of those parks, McIntyre Park, the skate park in particular, which I was very excited about, to do Soul Skate there, and then Washington Park for the end of summer swim. So shout out to Parks and Rec as well as the city of Charlottesville, who has sponsored us every year.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to take just a quick break and come right back with the little Ask Max to close out the hour, and we're going to be joined by Kalila. And I know y'all want to know what it is, because if we ask Kalila to stay and talk with us about it, but like I said, like we are in the soul of the city right about now, where we all about loving and sharing and communing with each other. So guess what? You won't want to miss it. So, take the bio break, tell a friend, whatever you got to do. IMHO live and direct.
Yeah.
Hold on, wait. You're listening to In My Humble Opinion, only on 101.3 Jams.
Is that a good one to play?
Excited?
It was sound like
I know it's been a lot of work.
Did you have that on purpose?
Oh, in the background.
It's a lot of work. I'm just
The thing I don't
coming
like
off
is
being
when you hit start,
sick, so I feel like real
but when you hit pause,
foggy
it
and
don't pause.
stuff.
It's
Oh,
crazy.
really?
Yeah. So this is the live broadcast. So when I turn the music on,
No, it
it'll
didn't.
play.
I don't know.
But when
I
I
honestly
stop,
think it
when I mute
was.
it doesn't pause.
Now that I think about it, I think it was this kombucha that I had. So it was so nasty, but I'm trying to do better about my little gut health, and I'm going through peri and stuff. And I think that because nothing makes sense. Enough.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. IMHO Talk Show.
Yes.
In the booth, in the building. Back like we never left. And as I told y'all, we have an Ask Max today, and guest in our previous segment is none other than Ms. Kalila Jones, talking about another year, 2025, Soul of Sea.
Right.
And so, I heard y'all talking about, sort of like what the soul means, right? And talking about like Black excellence and things of that sort. So there was a post that came up, Miss Max,
Mm-hmm.
And I know the artist and teacher Vic Mensa was one who helped it go viral.
Okay.
But the question was about how Black excellence replaced Black power, and how that's a negative, right? So the frame of the conversation was like, has Black excellence actually diminished us, and was that an intentional phrase to take away from our power? Because, and so that's the question. Black excellence versus Black power. Like, what does it mean? Has Black excellence taken away from our Black power, right? And what the frame of it was, Kalila, was, and y'all may have heard it and seen it online, but and different folks have this philosophy of thought, but it's saying that now we're told to be excellent, right? And so there's these pedestals and these thresholds that have been set up to sort of qualify what being excellent means, but we don't have the power. And so they liken it back to the Black Power movement when that started, and you had like more independence. We had, some would say, like more fervence, more bravado, more of our own. Whereas now they're saying Black excellence is us working within the system that controls us. And but if you have a great job, then you Black excellence. You making money, you Black excellence. Like there's these things that we're doing within the system, and what they're saying is that that's juxtaposed to Black power. So I wanted to toss that question out and get y'all's opinion on that thing, on if the term Black excellence is as great as we have propped it up to be, and again, is it in contrast to Black power? Just curious of y'all thoughts.
Should I let our guest go first?
I mean, if she would like.
Sure. For me, Black excellence has nothing to do with any external force than yourself. So,
Gotcha.
Me, if I strive for Black excellence, I'm striving for Black excellence within myself, within my own realm, within my business, for my son, for my nieces and nephews. It really has nothing to do with any external forces. I personally feel like that's a limiting belief, and it's a diversion. So if I'm Black excellence, I'm Black power too. You getting it all?
I feel
it's a 2-for-1. So, but that's my own thoughts on it. I do think that trying to wrap your head around that, especially if it's not your in your nature to strive for that, and it's okay. That's not everybody's nature. Excellence is that for a reason. It's not. Yeah. It's doing. It's the doing the all that work that others aren't willing to do. If everybody was doing it, it wouldn't be excellence, it would be regular. So I that's why I think it's limiting in your beliefs if you feel like that limits your power in any way, shape, or form. And I don't really look to other sources. And it is, I receive awards and recognition and acknowledgement all the time and never do anything for that. Yeah, it feels good to get because there's a lot of thankless work that you do. So just to know that there are people that but I do it for myself and because who I am as a person, and I'm leveling myself up, and I feel like when you do that, then you leave any space that you find yourself in better, and there's nothing more excellent than that. So
Ooh, nothing more excellent than that. I like that.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I think that Kalila and I definitely agree on the response to the question, Charles. Personally, I feel like I'm hearing what I consider a little bit of just a difference in semantics, Black excellence and Black power. I think that those who prefer the term of Black power, what then has to be considered is the generation,
true,
and those who who prefer to use Black Power are your staunch people who are just all about the opposition of any oppression, right, that comes against us as a Black people, right? And that looks more like a more aggressive response, if you will, to those things that they are anti this or anti that. But I think that Black Power is in Black excellence, and Black excellence is in Black Power because it shows up the same if you're deciding to be excellent. It's your preferred method of addressing something, you know, your preferred method of responding to something. And I don't necessarily think that either way that you show up is wrong. You know, I think we've all lived long enough to realize that there are strategies in order to get things done. But when you need to show up in the form of Black Power, when that part is necessary, then we can all shift and move according to what the situation requires of us. I think they're one and the same, and I don't fault one person or the other depending on which one they choose to operate within, as long as it is for the advancement of us as a people.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's intentionality.
And I also think that Black Power can also be, I'm thinking about Angela Davis, but it can also be associated with gender, right? If you do something as a Black male, it may be viewed as Black Power. If I do that same thing as a Black female, it may be more likely to be viewed as Black excellence. So
that's deep.
Yeah,
That's deep.
so
Okay.
There's a lot of different things to. I may have rambled a little bit, but a lot of different things to
that's good points.
consider there.
Yeah, that was good points. Now, you know, I'm definitely with y'all, you know, because while I'm the type that doesn't like to get, you know, like caught up in the semantics, as you said, it's still also like the philosophical and intellectual discussions at the same time, right? But the negative side always, regardless of what the topic is always when if we let ourselves get caught up in those semantics, you know what I mean, and then we miss the point, because a lot of times, you know, like it is meant to intentionally divert us, right, or sort of like or interrupt our progress, right. But for conversation, we can leave it at conversation, and sometimes agree to disagree, you know, like then I think it's all good. But checks and balances are good as well too, you know what I mean, because like a lot of times we do like find ourselves sort of in positions where you know, like to where we do get taken advantage of, right? So again, like being connected though, right? And as you said so eloquently, being, you know, doing it out of love, doing it for the community, right? Like that's what the soul of Seville is. That's what the soul of our people is, and what it's about. So as long as we're always striving for that excellence, right, and living within our power, you know, then ultimately it is one and the same. Yeah. You know.
I think sometimes too that's a projection.
Yeah.
Like not understanding, like, why is this so important to this person when it really, like, it should just be your own personal thing. So then it has to be quantified in a certain way, or it has to be defined a certain way, or just to understand, to try to gain understanding. But I mean, striving for Black excellence or Black power, it's a win-win in my book.
Yes, indeed. Miss Max, want to take us to break? Close us out.
Let's go to break. No, that was a good ask, Max, and I definitely want to thank Kalila for sharing some of her time with us here on Sunday. Looking forward to all of the activities, festivities with Soul of Seville. Is offering our great city this year. Thank you and your team for all of your hard work. I know that this was no easy task. A lot goes into it, and sometimes thanklessly. So I just want to give you your flowers. And
thank
your team.
you.
We
Thank
appreciate
you.
And the way that you give up yourself to make sure that the Black people in this city know that they're seen and they're heard and they have a space.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank y'all for having me too.
Yes, indeed. Anytime.
I appreciate the fans rocking with me. This is really just a small token.
Cool. You wanna grab a picture before you leave?
Did I need to record the spot?
I don't know if I have time today.
Okay, that's fine, because I sound real nasally, so I don't want to either.
And if you want, if you want to do it, you can. I guess me or Max can do it too.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, y'all can do it. If y'all want to do it, that's fine too. I don't like how I sound.
No, I feel you. And like, how much time, like, you think you have, like, as far as in the leeway? Like, can we schedule for you to come back, or you think you're running out of time? You want to get it out?
Oh, we can schedule to come back. I mean, as soon as possible, but like, I think I personally probably need like 2 or 3 days to get my.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that, and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all of these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
This is my humble opinion.
Hey, Jason. Oh, how you feel?
Where do we start?
Look, you have to take an aspirin after.
Except when it doesn't.
After the election. You know, I mean.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
One more again, IMHO Talk Show. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that. How does that sound, Miss Max?
Yeah, we do. We really do appreciate our listening audience. Wouldn't be here without you.
That's right. That's right. And when I say anywhere in the world, I kind of mean that thing literally as well, Miss Max. We are joined by our compadre Jason Melendez. Jason, how you feeling today?
I feel great. It's hot, very hot in
You
Virginia,
do?
but I feel
is.
generally great.
It is. So the thing is, like we
You
got.
may have had to go take an aspirin after that last in the primary there. Right?
No. Primaries come and go, and elections come and go, and
Yeah.
you're never guaranteed a win for anything. My name wasn't on the ballot, so I wasn't.
Right.
Definitely not the way I would have wanted things to go necessarily, but I think things went fine ultimately.
So the fact that you say that, do you think you'd ever be interested in running for office?
I'll tell you what. In the past, I actually did something really interesting. I almost explored running for Board of Supervisors when I lived in Chesterfield County.
Okay.
And the reason why I did that was because there was an incumbent, a Democratic incumbent, who was, it's probably in his 4th or 5th term at that point on the Board of Supervisors. And he was not voting, the way Democrats you think would vote on local government policy issues. he led the charge to get rid of public recycling in Chesterfield County. It's like just things like that, you know, super regressive budgeting, you know, overlooking the needs of the district, most you know, majority minority district in the county. So, you know, I think I could ultimately see a case where I would want to expand my public service into a more leadership-oriented role rather than a staff and professionalized-oriented role. But that being said, I am also very content where I am currently.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you seen that as sort of a normal progression? Like, have you seen a lot of your colleagues kind of, like, once you're sort of involved, it seems like a normal progression?
A few, yeah, actually. I mean, there's a number of actually legislative staffers that have, you know, went on to serve in elected office or previously served in elected office. Particularly at the local level is where we see a lot of it. But we also have a number of folks in the General Assembly right now who were former staff members. So, you know, it seems to be that folks do give it a shot.
Yeah, yeah. So enough of the small talk, y'all. But where do we go from here, though? Because, you know, Jason, we asked how you were doing, and we have a job to do on this show, like, no matter how hot it is, no matter how crazy things get in the world, and that's why we appreciate you coming in with us as well, you know, to lend your expertise. But wow, you know, I mean, like, sort of the outline that we have, you know, for us and for the listener audience is, you know, Trump is still at it. There's been a lot of, some would say, I don't know if we want to say advancements or like there's been a lot done. Let's just say that. Like, he's been busy. I'm trying to think of a nice way to say it, Max. He's been busy.
In the most evil and maniacal way possible.
Yes, whether it's foreign policy, domestic policy, including the big beautiful bill, as he calls it. That's one thing. When it comes to citizenship, you know, the birthright citizenship is now in jeopardy, right? So all the talk around that, like as y'all mentioned, we have our primaries that just happened locally, so we have the elections. And then maybe last but not least, you know, to round out sort of the top four, is we had a resignation here in Charlottesville for the state of Virginia, for the state university, none other than President Ryan, by all accounts appearing to be forced out of office by the DOJ, by the federal government, for, I guess, not wanting to be racist and not being conservative enough. Because there was a recording, I don't know if y'all saw that, like apparently there was leaked information about a meeting to where there was someone who actually said from the federal cabinet who said, like, y'all should try racism sometime. Why is everybody acting like that racism is so hard? Wow. Like that was a conversation apparently that was leaked. But out of those four, I don't know, Max, where do we start? I don't know.
Jason? They're all big meaty topics to contend with.
I mean, what's top of mind for you? Like maybe, you know,
I'll
President
say,
Ryan, maybe.
Yeah, you know, the UVA thing I think is top of mind for everybody right now. I mean, you know, the idea that the federal government has decided to begin micromanaging institutions of higher education is concerning. If DOJ's strategy as part of civil rights settlement and litigation is to try and force out, you know, public college presidents, like that's deeply concerning. I mean,
there's a board that had to endorse that, right?
So the Board of Visitors didn't exactly have any quite role in it. Okay. I mean, this was mostly because the DOJ was going after UVA because of the DEI programs. Yeah. This was something they were advocating for in their settlement. However, the board did have to accept his resignation, and the rector did do that. So it seems to be a done deal at this point. But I worry about what comes next. Like, who comes next?
And I was going to say, just a point of clarity to a little nuance to that too, is when we say DEI, of course, we know through this presidential administration, the term DEI has like taken on a life of its own. Yeah. Like to the Trump administration, it encompasses so much. Not just Trump, like to the conservative, you know, Republicans, you know, at this moment in time, it encompasses so much. So you're talking about, and even based on President Ryan's letter, his resignation letter, you know, he even touches on the fact that he had to make a hard choice, like, right, not wanting to step down, but not being selfish by also fighting it, right? Because his ultimatum was step down or like not only departments, which includes jobs, right, but funding gets cut, right? And funding getting cut, you know, like also can include maybe certain scholarships and things like that may go to minority students or students of color. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like, so it was something that he did reluctantly, but it is definitely an attack on all things that is diverse, that is equitable, and that is inclusive.
Yeah, you know, right? my worry, I think broadly, is that those same programs are going to be attacked no matter what, whether he's there or not, because they did it at Harvard, they did it at Columbia, they're doing it everywhere else. So unfortunate that he was put in this situation to resign. It's like not an easy situation at all. But I still am not optimistic that even the resignation is going to change ultimately what the federal government decides to still go after, and what this new Board of Visitors decides to go after some of these new members. We already have Ken Cuccinelli, who's refusing to step down after the Senate Privileges and Elections Committee blocked his appointment. So, who knows what happened? Maybe Ken will be the next president. Ultimately, I would not be shocked if the Board of Visitors did something like that.
Wow.
So I think there's a lot of members of the Board of Visitors that need to contend with themselves and think about what's better for the institution. These are political patronage roles, so I understand that they feel they're beholden to Governor Youngkin in Richmond, but I think they need to really think deep down within.
Have they been vocal at all with the Board of Visitors?
Not that I've heard. No. They've been pretty quiet on all things this year, really. Especially since the turnover with some of the new Republican appointed members that had come in. So we don't quite know what comes next and what they're thinking in their mind. But ultimately, if we're thinking about the goal of every decision at UVA should be twofold. One, to improve the education of students, or threefold, I'll say. One, to improve the education of students. Two, to provide quality health care. And three, to have strong community relations. And none of this resignation does anything to further any of those three goals.
Yeah. And that name that I heard you mention about possibly being appointed, did you say Kent?
Ken Cuccinelli.
Ken.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you said Kent as in Dr. Kent that also stepped down from the medical center last year.
No.
I was like, whoa, this is breaking news. This is breaking news.
No. Ken Cuccinelli,
Yeah, Ken, yeah.
Which we hope not. We don't want that either.
Right,
that's worse. That's not good. So.
Yeah, and it was, I guess it's sort of like a shot in the dark, metaphor, so to speak, right, Max? Because if somebody gives you an ultimatum of saying like, you need to step down. I was trying to think of a good contrast, but I'm just gonna say it plainly. Like that if you don't step down, we're gonna take all these benefits away, right? So then, but you still knowing that stepping down, they still don't like what's in place, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't. But you're gonna do, if you're a good-hearted person, which he definitely appears to be, at least by these actions that he's taking, right? It's like you at least gonna do all that you can do, to try to save, as he said in his letter, like putting the staff first and not being selfish. Because again, this is the biggest employer, in our area, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot that affects the community by these decisions. But but the Board of Visitors needs to grow some legs, grow a spine, grow a backbone, and remember what public education is about, what higher learning is about, what the university experience is supposed to be about. Like whether we're talking about like research and things like that that's supposed to help make the world a better place, and it not being based on any particular person's individual set of values, right? It's supposed to be about the greater good, right? Especially when you are the state university.
I think it's also going to cause ultimately a reckoning for the state, and at least in Democrats in the Virginia General Assembly, to think about the oversight process for public institutions of higher education, because right now it's very executive heavy. They're taking a lot of top-down instruction from Governor Youngkin in Richmond, and I think this is kind of because we haven't had this issue in the past, but it's kind of exposed that perhaps we need to really think about how we govern our universities, how we can get more participatory processes in that, getting staff members on the Board of Visitors, getting voting student members on the Board of Visitors. They've got an advisory student member. But they don't have a faculty member, so there might have to be some adjustments there too.
Mm-hmm. And what's next, possibly? Because I know you're involved with a lot of our state, representatives. Like, are there next steps that's being made public? At least from the front of, of potential things that can be done to try to uphold, like the integrity and the values that like that we would like to keep at our university in the face of all this.
Yeah, there's at least one iron in the fire currently. I'll also say, folks have rumored that George Mason might be next, because George Mason has long had a very strong diversity program. But I'll say, when it came to Ken Cuccinelli's appointment, which the Senate Privileges and Elections Committee rejected, usually it's precedent that if the committee rejects it without the full Senate rejecting it, the person will just step back, because ultimately they're not going to be approved. Ken is arguing, and the governor's arguing, that he should stay on until the full Senate has a chance to convene and vote, which probably won't be until September or maybe January. So Ken is trying to cling on to this role on the Board of Visitors as long as he can, even though the committee has decided they do not want him on the Board of Visitors. So a number of senators, I think, I potentially, I don't know if Senator Deeds, our senator, was named in the suit, but I know Louise Lucas is leading the suit, Senator Lucas is leading the suit. And a number of Democratic senators are saying, to some of these university boards that, if you have somebody who was rejected by the committee, they need to step back.
So who's providing oversight? I know we got more topics to go to, but this is very important. So is there oversight for boards of visitors at the university, or does their vote sort of have the final say? And of course, because again, some people say that if the UVA Board of Visitors would have stepped up or maybe challenged, right, the DOJ, that the outcome may have been different. So
The oversight?
Yeah. So I'm curious, is there oversight?
Generally, I mean, the governor is the oversight. The Secretary of Education is part of that oversight. The General Assembly has an oversight role on all things executive branch related, but by nature, our General Assembly being a part-time legislature, they're just not meeting frequently enough to be able to actually provide that kind of valuable oversight. But it's long been, I think, public institutions of higher education in Virginia have just been very executive heavy in terms of their control. We're definitely seeing that with Glenn Youngkin. He's made a concerted effort to kind of put people that he wants on these boards of visitors, not just qualified people. He wants to put people he wants on there.
Yeah, and my understanding, Max, is that it's about the federal funding ultimately, right? It's so your university could have a board that's saying, no, we stand by our president, we stand by our liberal arts, or whatever the case is. But then the federal government could be like, okay, well, if you do, then we're pulling X amount of funding.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have any sense of how much we get that the University of Virginia gets from the federal government?
I probably could narrow you down to $1, but I mean, it's a lot. I mean, in terms of research, UVA Health does a tremendous amount of research across all health fields. We get federal funding for transit support, I believe, in Charlottesville as well, for the university transit system. Of course, you get students that are on different forms of grants and Pell Grants and whatnot. I mean, there's just a number of money, and a ton of money that comes from the federal government down to the UVA.
Yeah.
So it would be a huge deal for us.
See, the thing is that I'm listening to you guys talk about what the Board of Visitors stepping up, and I hear you talking about what the current DEI equity programming that the university has, and crossing our fingers, I guess, at this point that they don't repeal any of that. But we are talking about the University of Virginia, and part of me wonders whether or not these changes are changes that somebody's just waiting for time and opportunity in order to put in place.
I think absolutely. If you saw the Jefferson Council's
take the University of Virginia. Let me put it differently.
No, you're right.
The University of Virginia great again.
Yeah, I mean, you saw the Jefferson Council's letter last month, where they were actually calling for Jim Ryan to resign last month, and there's no doubt about it, in my mind at least, that a number of people that are involved in that Jefferson Council Alumni Association probably have some pretty close ties to the Trump administration. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked. These are pretty high net worth individuals, pretty well connected into alumni from UVA. And they were calling for Jim Ryan to resign last month just over DEI. So I bet they are probably elated and thrilled. But the students are not, faculty isn't, and it's gonna leave a big stain on the university. But I think all I know is the Board of Visitors ought to pick wisely, because there's probably going to be a number of protests at Carrs Hill for months, months on end.
No, it's just don't worry about that.
Well, that's true until they get fed up.
Yeah, we are talking to Jason Melendez, political strategist, amongst so many titles. So talking about the resignation that hit home this week of President Jim Ryan being forced out by the DOJ. So I guess, guys, so sort of like working up from the university into the city and up, because one thing that's another conversation that I know that is heavy around here as well is citizenship, right? And like how to handle immigration and things of that sort. So if I'm not mistaken, Jason, right, this new big beautiful bill that Trump calls it, like it's a part of his domestic policy bill, And I think some of the birthright changes are a part of that bill, right? Or is it separate from that bill?
I'm not entirely sure. I know the bill is being read out in full on the Senate. I don't know if you all saw that, but the Senate Democrats led a push to make sure that the 900-page bill be read out in full. So that's been going on all night, and I should probably, last time I checked, they were on page 700. So they still got a little bit of ways to go. I wouldn't be shocked that there are a number of immigration-related changes in the legislation. The Supreme Court case as well kind of just opened up a floodgate for the administration to go after what it's been long wanting to go after. Other big concurrent issue with the litigation, the Supreme Court's decision, is its impact on injunctions. I think ultimately, we had this idea, this precedent before, that if a district court made a decision, you'd have an injunction, potential nationwide injunction, so that we wouldn't see these kinds of issues pop up elsewhere until it had been litigated. And that applies to a whole host of issues, whether it's abortion or whether it was the Affordable Care Act or anything. And they've kind of knocked down that wall, and it's very possible that we might have a broken judiciary, one other step into a broken judicial branch as a result of that. But the birthright citizenship order, I know a number of folks that just hit close to home personally for. We have a number of great organizations doing fantastic work here in Charlottesville that I know that hit home personally for. So I'm a little bit worried about what comes next in that trajectory.
Yeah, because our folks in the Latino community, right, have already been talking and concerned about just the everyday safety, right, of being profiled, having safe spaces, right, and we're talking about like good citizens, regardless of the pictures that gets painted, by some. We're talking about people here making an honest living, but kids are worried about going in public because they're not sure if ICE is going to show up, and things of that sort. So they're already facing that. But now, if this birthright legislation gets fully passed, then we're talking about it being like by law, like you no longer, can be here unless. Unless you were born here, and that means birthright means that your parent can't come here and have you here and say you're a citizen. If your parent is illegal, automatically makes you illegal. Like, that is a huge deal.
Big issue with equal access, equal protection under law. That when you kind of think about it, this is not offering equal protection under law. This is creating a bifurcated system where some folks are separate than others in terms of their right to be here and lawfully be present. I also say, kind of in building on the concerns that we've been seeing with ICE in different communities. Of course, we saw the raid that happened at our courthouse in April, but much more recently in Chesterfield, at the Chesterfield County Courthouse, I think it was upwards of 14 folks had been picked up by ICE in their courthouse. And these were mostly folks who were, at the General District Court, they had received their judgment, went to go pay their fines, and then right after they paid their fines, they were getting picked up by ICE. These are, most of the offenses were like, maybe didn't have an updated registration, or got a fine for a safety hazard on their vehicle. These weren't folks who were showing up to General District Court because they had murdered somebody or because they had done something to harm somebody. These are folks who were there for very minor offenses and then were in turn being picked up by ICE. And that's deeply concerning because it just shows this pattern of them willing to use courthouses as their kind of front to do operations. Courthouses they don't have entitlement to, honestly.
Yeah.
And so with this thing that we're discussing here, how will that impact our economy? If we're deporting, and deporting anyone, especially those who fall within the whole birthright thing that you just described there, as well as those who are here illegally, and presumably a lot of those people are employed, work here in the United States. How does that impact our economy?
It's going to have a tremendous impact. In every state. A number of folks who've come here make up a bulk of our blue-collar workers, our agriculture-related workers, of course, important for Virginia. And I think states like Virginia, states like Florida, who are kind of looking at this and saying, this is actually ultimately bad for some of the businesses and some of the economic opportunities that these states have, and I think ultimately there is going to have to be some pushback from business owners ultimately. That being said, a good question. I guess time will tell. That being said, there's a lot of room to go around for improving those work conditions too. This is not just a kind of a one-sided thing. There's on the business side, a lot of these some of these blue-collar labor industries where there aren't strong union protections. There is a lot of work to be done to make sure that labor is dignified, justified, and well paid. But all in all, the economy is going to hurt from mass deportations.
So let me ask you something else, and this is going to be a taboo question, but I'm asking it for the sake of asking it. What are the positive things that could potentially come out of this? How will it change America?
I don't know if I can really draw down one positive aspect.
Okay.
If I'm Elon Musk or Stephen Miller, for example, perhaps my answer would be that we're moving closer to a pure white society. But otherwise, that would be the Stephen Miller answer. But I don't think there's any rational positive thing to come out of this necessarily.
Aside from that, we know race is a factor, but I'm talking economy. I'm talking healthcare. Resources, things like that. Housing.
Even resources-wide, housing-wide, I know there's a lot of folks on the right that will say, immigrants that come here are taking up, too many resources or housing is too expensive. Housing is too expensive because we haven't built any housing.
Okay.
That's ultimately our fault. We didn't build enough housing for ourselves. And we've got a lot of work to do to reverse that. But when it comes to things like healthcare and resources, it's a humanitarian issue. Ultimately, these folks have come from countries like El Salvador or countries in Central and South America that are unsafe places or do not have quality access to healthcare. We're actually giving that money away in aid. We're giving that money to those countries in aid. So the difference of them, being here and receiving those services and being able to build prosperity for themselves and their families, versus letting them languish in a country that they may not feel safe in, that we are providing a tremendous amount of aid to. I don't know if it's much of a difference at all.
Just a question.
Yeah.
And there's a book, I forget the exact title, but it's something to the effect of the economy of colonialism, right? The title, something like that, right? And so essentially, what it gets down to is that immigration wouldn't be as much of a problem, right, if there wasn't for colonialism, right? Because essentially it's talking about how resources were taken from other countries.
Yeah.
Right?
When we go to places and plunder places, well, what other option do you have other than to go and search
where
for
the
something?
resources.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the same thing like we said last time on the show when we were talking about the unhoused population, the downtown mall. If you become, unhoused in places like Louisa or in Fluvanna, you're coming to Charlottesville because that's the one place you can find all the resources you need.
Yeah, spot on. And Maxie, and it just goes to show, with a lot of things that go on and we know how people in power positions try to use others against each other like a chess match, right? So one of the things that Trump said in one of his recent speeches was that the birthright clause was meant for slave babies. Literally, verbatim what he said. And so, to me, that, I have two feelings about that, because on one side it's kind of I think that's him kind of trying to pander to black people, to be like, black people, y'all don't worry, y'all be cool with what we doing, to the Latino population, right? I feel like that's what he's trying to do on one side, but on the other side, it makes me think there are some people who really believe that white people are indigenous to this land.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because for you to say that birthright is only something that is even referring to people of color, right? So you're talking about, Africans that were brought here, or people of African descent that were brought here, or you're talking about, brown immigrants that come into the country now, right? To keep phrasing immigration as if it's only black and brown people that immigrate here, shows a mental illness that a lot of people have. I can't even just say conservatives. A lot of people have right now, because to say a statement like that again means that there's people that believe that this is a white land, that white people somehow are indigenous to here and didn't immigrate here as well.
Yeah, sure. I think that their reality, their personal reality, is their truth. And so, yes, they convince themselves of that, and no one's telling them any differently.
Yeah. But that being said, also here locally,
since I brought up Charlottesville,
the primaries. So, what's the big takeaways from the primaries we just had earlier this month?
Yeah, I'd say a few big takeaways. Ranked choice voting worked tremendously well. When Arlington first went to go use it, which Arlington was the first locality in Virginia to use it a few years ago, they had a few little stumbles in terms of getting everything smooth, but we did not have those same issues. We actually had a really seamless process. So shout out to our registrar for making that easy and well communicated to voters.
So before you go on to can I add a caveat there, or can I get you to elaborate on ranked choice voting? Because I've actually heard, Max, I've heard some people question the ranked choice voting based on how the city's election for mayor turned out. Right, and again, it's something, RCV is new, and there's still a lot to be understood, about it, because it still doesn't make sense to some people. Actually, doing popular vote versus ranking votes. So some people are kind of wondering, how did the candidate, Jen Fleischer, that received the majority of the votes by percentage, right? And then I believe Juan Diego was in the 30-some range, and then Brian Pinkston was in the teens, right? Some folks, and it could be conspiracy, but some folks are just their ranked choice voting somehow sway it and work in Jen's favor somehow. And I think that's more because people just didn't expect for it to turn out, for the election result to turn out that way. But on the other side, there are some people that are questioning it because of how that turned out.
Yeah, I have a tremendous confidence in the results. Taylor has done a fantastic job in implementing ranked choice voting. Again, there's a few learning lessons for Charlottesville, because there are ways we can make this process better over time. One thing in my mind, I think we could probably do away with Democratic primaries in Charlottesville. Most cities in Virginia don't hold primaries for city council. So that's something we could do. It would save us money, and to be quite honest, I don't know. We haven't elected a Republican in years, so we don't really need a Democratic primary, because we're not pitting two parties against each other. We've only elected Democrats in the city for the past several years. So I think we could probably do away with the Democratic primaries in Charlottesville and simply just move to the general election cycle. The other thing I think Charlottesville would benefit from is districts or wards. Charlottesville's been able to evade.
Is it big enough? You think it's big enough?
It is. Well, any locality is technically big enough. We've been able to evade the conversation because you can make the claim that under the Voting Rights Act, our voting power, black voting power isn't diluted. So that's how Charlottesville's been able to evade it. But most other cities in Virginia that have had to go through charter rewrites have had to implement districts now. Virginia Beach, Norfolk. Simply because there was actually a real legitimate claim that there was voting power being diluted.
And us being a Dillon Rule state wouldn't impact that. And then do you think that we may need more counselors if we were to have
representation?
Districts?
It may be worth it. Perhaps even you could do 6 counselors and 1 at-large mayor, who's not a strong mayor but just an at-large mayor, which is what City of Fairfax does.
That's interesting.
So you got a whole bunch of options that you can implement or play with, or you can keep the number as it is. And just have the districts is all.
What's the benefit?
I think it's better representation, more localized representation. One of the things that we learned out of the results from ranked choice voting was how well Jen did in the Summit precinct, which is her home precinct, I believe, and we haven't elected a counselor from that side of town for a while. And one of the things, if you look at our current council, a lot of the members actually live not too far from each other. So I do think that if we had wards, say in lower income parts of town, we might be able to actually elect strong representation for those folks.
I don't know if we want that.
I think it's a win. I think it's a win.
It might be a win. I don't know if we want it.
So are we saying having a council that's made up of people from the different districts? Different neighborhoods. I don't know. If it's equal though, right, Max? If you,
the districts are all. When you draw the districts, it'd be kind of just like how we draw the precincts. You have to take into account certain factors. Ultimately, it should produce fair representation. Is ultimately the goal. The at-large system.
That part.
the at-large system is, kind of, I think, one of the things that folks are getting a little tired of, honestly. And I think we might see it with this school board race as well, this whole at-large school board race where you've got all these, so many candidates running. I think folks are maybe going to be interested in the idea that perhaps we move towards, but that would have to be something that is implemented under state law.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, that could because I mean the makeup of Charlottesville though, Max, right? Like because right now again the at-large piece, like he said, you have the people that have the money and the resource, right, to be able to pay more attention and come to all the meetings or like send the letters or like just to like sort of throw their weight, right? And they may be from the smaller neighborhood, but think about if 10th and Page, West Haven, like let's think about like if all these different areas had specific and consistent representation, like that could be a benefit to the greater community.
Yeah, well,
but do you think that if individuals were interested in their ward community being represented on council, that we would already see them running for council?
I think there's such a barrier to running to office these days. There's a few different barriers. One is a skill barrier. I mean, combined between all three candidates that ran this year, at least $80,000 to $90,000 was raised between all three campaigns. So that's a hurdle in itself. But then there's also kind of the compensation piece, which the city council has voted to raise its salaries because the compensation was so low and you spend so much time away from your regular job to do some of these city council duties. So that was a barrier for folks as well. But I think a perfect example as to why I think wards would work perfectly is because we already have the precincts that are pretty much roughly divided evenly, but the amount of voters who actually show up from the precinct that votes at Charlottesville High School and that side of town is way more than the amount of folks who show up on the other side of town, the direct opposite side of town, showing up in elections. So arguably right now, folks in that northeast portion of the city are extremely well represented because they're all showing up. But you're thinking about it, we want to activate a broader swath of our residents, and I think a district forum could do that.
Speaking of voters, were you surprised at all about how many voters participated in the primaries for council?
I was, yes and no.
So put that into perspective. We are a population of 50,000.
Yeah.
How many people voted?
I want to say it was probably 2,000 or something.
I think it was like approximately 6.
6, okay. I might have been looking at per person votes, one of the things, I think the biggest takeaway is that more people voted in the city council primary than they did in the statewide primaries, which I've never seen that before. Where you have more residents show up for a down ballot race in a primary than the top ticket races. So that was interesting. Definitely really unique to see some of the breakdowns by precinct. But folks were engaged. This was on the back of our ballot, so it wasn't on the front of our ballot. So it was interesting that people were still flipping their ballot over, making sure that they were, looking at the ranked choice voting ballot and voting however they wanted to vote. So that was a positive thing ultimately. So hopefully we continue to see folks involved in city elections.
Yeah, and now what about from the state standpoint? What's some of the key takeaways, maybe outside of Charlottesville, from the primaries?
Yeah, I'll say I couldn't have not been happier from the statewide primaries this year. The Attorney General's race was kind of hotly watched towards the end because Shannon Taylor, who is the current Commonwealth's attorney in Henrico, had taken a significant sum of money from Dominion Energy and political contributions, upwards of $800,000 by the time we were coming around to the primary. So Clean Virginia, of course, an organization local to Charlottesville, spent a lot of time advocating and investing in Jay Jones's campaign and making sure that we could have a black nominee for Attorney General this year who's actually poised to do really well. Lieutenant Governor's race, and there was a lot of folks here who kind of split on Senator Hashmi and Senator Rouse. I've known Senator Hashmi for years. I've always viewed that in this field she was the most qualified candidate. It was a very close race at the end of the day. But Senator Hashmi, I think, is going to make a fantastic lieutenant governor.
I think a lot of people were surprised by that too.
I think folks were
too.
The
public opinion was sort of Stoney definitely, maybe Rouse, but Hashmi kind of was a dark horse.
But what I'll say, I think is there were a lot of political pundits who were saying, oh, there was no way Ghazal Hashmi would do well in the western half of Virginia,
Right.
up and down the I-81 corridor because she's a Muslim woman who was born in India and still has an accent.
Right.
But it turns out that was actually her bread and butter. That was where she did the best. She did really well up and down 81 in a way I didn't quite expect myself, honestly. But
What was the strategy? Do we know?
she spent a lot of time there. I think that was the win.
okay.
She spent time there, and she spent money running ads there.
Okay.
There were a lot of candidates who didn't spend a requisite amount of time down there. For example, I'll say like Senator Rouse, fantastic candidate, fantastic guy. I think he thought he had Blacksburg and Montgomery County in the bag because he played Tech football.
Yeah.
But that was a city that voted for Hashmi, or a town that voted for Hashmi, I think Hashmi just made a concerted effort to spend her time down there, and it paid off. It really did.
Yeah. Big talk. We are talking to Jason Melendez, political strategist. Always good conversation. And so I think what we had last on the agenda, besides what else you all have in mind, is talking about the foreign policy. Like anything that you can share in that regard of where we are right now when it comes to our country's involvement, and when it comes to folks thinking about like our young men and women that protect the country, right, and sort of really what's at stake, right? Because there's a lot of of course there's always been a lot of opinions on the sides of like our foreign policy when it comes to what we should be involved in and why we shouldn't be involved there. Even things we've talked about, Max, on this show, particularly like when it comes to the sort of the theology or like the religious philosophy of how this country to this day, takes the modern country of Israel and makes it biblical, right? Yeah. And say that that's why we make certain foreign policy decisions that we do. Some people say that that's, like way off, base, and that like that is a misconstrued belief, right? And then, of course, we have Muslim immigrants and stuff here as well. And so then they also, as we've seen, for a while, especially since like 9/11 time, like they get, like they get outcast and they get profiled more heavily as well. Like when these kind of dust ups happen between, Iran or whether it's Iraq or, in other places out there in that area. But and even I even saw something recently, Jason, as well too, where they were saying that there was some communication apparently, and you don't know what to believe on the internet anymore, by the way. I will add that disclaimer. But apparently there was one who even said that there was some Israeli officials that were even planning some sort of attack on the U.S. and then blaming Iran for it, because the public opinion right now is people are kind of expecting Iran to do something, right? It's like so you have like just this whole like just like hodgepodge of stuff that's going on. So I'm just curious on from your perspective with all that that's going on, like what you could help us put in perspective.
Gosh, I mean it's a mess. I mean I kind of share that concern that you started out with, because I come from a family of service members as well. So it is a mess. I think the attack on Iran that the United States led, was a little short-sighted. In fact, I think we might learn that very soon, that perhaps it didn't even quite accomplish what we thought it was going to accomplish. It may have just delayed them by a few months, and we'll be back at this junction in a few years. Ultimately, what I think folks ought to remember is that we had a nuclear deal in place, negotiated by President Obama. It wasn't 100% perfect, but not a lot of things are 100% perfect. But it gave us accountability. We were able to check in and see where the Iranian government was enriching uranium. We were able to ensure that they weren't using it for defense capabilities and that they were only using it for civilian uses. And there was incentives tied for their compliance, and it was working. But Donald Trump pulled us out of that deal, and ultimately the deal collapsed. And that's ultimately why we're here now. We had foreign policy in place that was designed to curb this threat over the long run, because, in this mindset, Iran is determined to have a nuclear weapon. They want to be a nuclear power. So destroying their uranium stock, is only going to set them back a few months. They're going to continue on that goal. We need to remove the incentive for them to want to be a nuclear power. We need to remove the incentive for a lot of countries to want to be a nuclear power, because ultimately these are weapons we really don't need in the first place. I mean, so I think it is. I mean, it's ultimately disappointing that we, we're willing to accede to the demands of the Prime Minister of Israel and kind of insert ourselves in this conflict in a way that was not necessary, and it ultimately put our service members at risk. Because Iran's retaliation is always going to be our bases in the Middle East. So,
and Trump's response was just mind blowing to me. It's mind blowing to a certain extent, right? Like I guess I gotta qualify that because I'm not surprised, because that is how like bigots act, right? It's like he's surprised that they're not listening to him. I mean, you follow back, like he's literally cursed on TV.
Oh yeah,
because the ceasefire ended, and it's almost like he really thought that something that's been going on for centuries, because he told them to stop, they were going to stop.
I mean, he's spending too much time on his phone and on Twitter and on Truth Social instead of being in rooms and communicating with heads of government and heads of state to make this work. What's really interesting to me is, our director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, is really a staunch, pacifist, if you want to put it in any sort of way. She actually, I mean, the rumor had been that she was in fact cut out of these dialogues about whether the United States would lead this kind of tactical operation in Iran. And so that's interesting to see that there were members of cabinet amongst themselves sparring over what direction to take. And ultimately, some of the most important voices are being literally cut out just on the basis of ideology.
Because I believe reps from the National Intelligence, I think it was, like they were actually disagreeing on the statements that the White House press secretary made
so there was
about
that,
the impact of the attack.
The White House was disagreeing with what DIA was saying, and then ultimately, in all of that, the White House, it's customary that they'll notify. There's 8 members of Congress that form the Gang of 8, and there's members from the majority and the minority in both the House and Senate, and the leaders of the intelligence committees in both chambers. And usually the White House will inform them of operations before they happen. And as far as we understand currently, the White House didn't tell the Democratic members of the Gang of 8, which makes up half the Gang of 8, about what was what they were planning. So a lot of war powers questions. We're actually seeing Republicans, ironically, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie, some of the most conservative folks, saying, why are we going down this route? I mean, President Trump spent all of his time campaigning saying that Joe Biden was getting us into wars and that he wasn't going to start any wars, and now we're at 6 months in, and he leads he flies 3 B-2 bombers into Iran unprovoked. So I'm curious to see how this all shakes out. It seems that things are starting to calm down a little bit, and the ceasefire hopefully will hold. But I mean, there needs to be diplomacy for a long-term solution.
Yeah. And you said something key that that was so pertinent. I don't want to overlook. Like when you talked about the incentive, like getting rid of the incentive for an Iran wanting to have nuclear weapons. And to me, that incentive is, check it out, Max, how you treat people, right? It's like, maybe if we stop trying to rule the world with an iron fist, you don't have to live in fear. It's almost like being a drug dealer, right?
Is it?
It's almost like running the streets. No, because you hear people that run the streets all the time, like, as soon as they get out the game, they say, I'm tired of having to watch my back, right? Like, I'm tired of having to look over my shoulder and worry about this and that. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, as long as we about that life, then you're gonna live with the threat of retaliation.
Right. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I hear both of you are saying, but I don't know that there's any amount of incentive, because that would make people are power driven and power hungry, and countries, and especially those that we're talking about right now. And so I don't think that there's any amount of incentive that would make them not want to be that. It's not about the dollar, in my opinion. It's about being. It's about power.
I think that very well plays a role in it. I still think it's worth a shot. I mean, because now is probably the better time to strike, while the iron is hot. These last few years, Iran has spent a lot of their time building up their power in the region through terrorist proxies, like Hamas and Hezbollah and a number of terrorist organizations throughout the region. As many of those organizations have started to cripple and to fall, what ultimately led to this showdown is now the fact that there really is no buffer between Iran and Israel. I mean, the catfight is now literally between them. So if there's any time to perhaps inject the idea of an incentive, perhaps it's now, when both Iran and Israel are vulnerable to a potentially massive conflict.
Yes, the Jason Melendez with the good word as always. What are we missing, Jason? I mean, that was a jam-packed hour right there, and I'm actually proud of us for getting through that. That was
the one thing I'm going to throw out that we didn't cover is the New York City primary elections, which I think was ultimately a more interesting primary election than the Charlottesville primary election. I grew up in New Jersey, so I was always used to seeing, Andrew Cuomo on TV and his brother, when he was on Chris Cuomo, when he was on CNN and whatnot. But Zohran Mamdani was a fantastic candidate. He's going to really shake things up. And one thing I want to see is Democrats in our party. He may be further to the left than most average Democrats in our party, but he captivated folks, and folks showed up and voted because he talked about issues people care about. And as far as it seems, Fox News has stopped talking about his policy platform because Fox News, people that watch Fox News probably are starting to like it too. I mean, giving resources to newborn, families with newborns, raising the minimum wage, things that Republicans are starting to tag in on now. I mean, so he is the kind of candidate I think that will, inspire some enthusiasm. We'll hopefully see more younger folks running for office, especially at the local level where the impact is so undervalued sometimes. And there's a lot that to be done right now. So that's one election I think really interesting to look how he played his cards there, because he went from being very far behind Cuomo in the polls to washing Cuomo away. And I know Cuomo's seething, but Zohran Mamdani has done
he took it for granted.
He did, but Zohran ran a fantastic campaign, and I think he'll make an excellent mayor. It's really unfortunate to see how Republicans are coming out to say the most Islamophobic things about him.
Crazy.
Already, not shocked, but already. But that was an interesting election. That was an election I think that is a turning point within Democratic politics. Folks always watch the New York City primary election, at least on the Democratic side, because it usually gives us a good barometer, like what can we expect on the national stage. And this is, to me, I view it as a turning point. I hope more candidates will pick some cues from him.
Yeah. And it almost shows a good and bad. Well, it does of sort of modern day political like campaigns, right? Because the new New York mayor-elect, I guess, is also like sort of celebrity status. You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, you just go on Instagram, you saw photos of him everywhere.
Yeah. Like he's done music videos and stuff like that. So,
So
So we're kind of in a time now to where like your celebrity status can help you, right? Like it's sort of like your popularity. But the thing is politics. Voting has always been sort of a popularity contest to some certain extent. But as long as we're choosing people because they're qualified and not because.
And he's a two-term assemblyman, so I think he's ready to step into the job. I think what he did so well in terms of leaning in with that kind of popularity status kind of concept, because he didn't have that before. Most people probably wouldn't have known, outside of New York City maybe, would have known who Zohran Mamdani was until maybe April. But he really leaned into meeting folks where they're at, unconventional media, really listening to folks, and I think it's made a huge difference. Just hearing the things that people want to hear and actually having a plan to deliver on it, because he wasn't just saying stuff, but he actually had thoroughly written out policy platform on his website, PDFs with information, how he plans to achieve some of these things. So he is a model for candidates. If anyone's looking to run for office, they ought to look towards him and take some cues.
Yeah, and our listener Amanda.
And I saw Deja Fox, also a good example. I was seeing her. I saw one of her Instagram posts the other day. Another great young Democrat running for office. So young Democrats are doing some things, guys.
Hey, look at them. As long as we get something right.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
Let's do something right. Like I don't, like dare I say, regardless of political party, like we got to get back to some common sense stuff.
Oh yeah.
Like
government should be somewhat boring.
Care about the common good, right? That's what we should be doing. And then the way that we that we look at things fiscally, right, as far as a budget, we can debate that, and there's different aspects of governing that we can debate, but when it comes to respect for the office.
Yeah.
Like respect for all citizens, right? And looking out for our constituents. Like that should never be questioned.
Yeah, I mean,
And right
ultimately,
now it
like
is.
I want to
Yeah.
wake up to headlines of good headlines rather than waking up to headlines that we might potentially be in a war with Iran. Like, I want to get back to the days where some things can be just a little bit boring and casual.
Yeah.
Be nice. But
Good stuff. Max, you got us for break?
yeah, let's do it. Let's go to break. When we come back, very quickly.
You good? Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. We are going to break. I thought Charles turned my mic off. We are going to break. We'll be right back. Much more conversation here on In My Humble Opinion. Stay with us.
Yes, indeed.
Photo time.
I think so. Yep. So I don't know. Yeah.
Who do you got after this? I know you guys had PCOB coming, right?
These on, just turn those off. Yeah.
Is it the director or is it the chair that you guys got? Okay.
It's usually already up. I had turned it down because
Yeah,
it
my
stopped
bad.
playing. You good? Yeah, it's a learning curve. It's all good.
I was glad with the
Make sure that doesn't push.
That was one thing I heard pulled it a lot. If that was one thing that I think moved the election a lot, it was that issue.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all of these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning into In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
That's the next time, right? See, it's our, that's cliche, our show will be on. Yeah, you got a good one? Should we switch it up or you got the one pose? It's good.
Yeah, let's switch it up.
Hold on, wait. You're listening to In My Humble Opinion, only on 101.3.
As always, man, so you got another event
Support
coming
for
up?
this station today is coming from Ace Auto Center Express, your local maintenance and repair option. Ace provides tire work and alignment, brakes, exhaust, and Virginia State inspection, and can be found at 2000.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show.
Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. This is Charles. One more time. IMHO Talk Show. Here and back like we never left. And thank you for joining us all show thus far. And we are at the bottom of yet another show. And we are in this last hour joined by some folks, some good folks here in our city that do a little oversight work, because everybody needs checks and balances, right? Everybody got to answer to somebody. But now I am definitely delighted right now to be joined by a couple of members of the Police Citizens Oversight Board, Civilian, Police Civilian Oversight Board, and none other than James and Inez. So thank y'all for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, indeed. And I'm sorry, I kind of skipped the formalities. You know, I think you and I on a first name basis, right, Officer Gonzalez, right?
So the official title is Executive Director of Police Civilian Oversight, and Mr. Walker here is the Management Analyst for Police Civilian Oversight.
All right, good stuff. And once again, thank you all for joining us. So, but the PCOB, as it operates here in the city of Charlottesville, let's just start right there. For those that don't know, kind of give the background and the purpose.
How about James? He did a presentation on this recently at our town hall.
All right, good stuff.
Sure, yeah. So as part of what I've been working on with some annual reporting is looking at the history of the PCOB. And I think a lot of people tie it back to events in 2017 with the Unite the Right rally, but really there was work going on long before that. It just was a progressive process that I think really was sparked off by that event in 2017. And so it's gone through a couple of iterations, but really the as it exists today was created by some state law that allowed localities to create these sort of entities and put some teeth behind them in terms of what they could and couldn't do. Okay. And that has allowed us to locally build an ordinance that tries to idealize what oversight looks like in a locality. Specifically taking complaints and investigating those complaints independently of the police department, but also looking over the shoulder of their investigations and into complaints that they receive as well as auditing other aspects of the police department. One of the things that we look at is the budget, the police department's budget. Okay. And that's something that we will be releasing in a report pretty soon that looks over that. And we don't make judgment calls on what we agree or disagree with. We're just trying to present transparency in the facts so that the citizens can be aware of how money is spent or how practices and procedures are done. And I think another big piece is policy. So policy is something we look at frequently, both here locally as well as at the state level. And that's going to inform, I think, some of our discussion today. There's some recent state policy that is changing the automated license plate reader protections across the state, kind of formalizing it so that it's not each entity, each locality across the Commonwealth doing their own thing. It's trying to standardize that. So that's some of the variety of stuff we do.
Gotcha. And Inez, did you want to?
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, we're a team of only 2 people, so we have to prioritize what it is we do on a day-to-day. Flock has in fact taken a great deal of our time simply because it's important to the community. They've expressed an interest, they've expressed concerns about how the system is utilized. And so that's taken up a lot of our time. And what Mr. Walker had focused on initially was the operational aspect of the Flock system, right? In order for us to know what it is we can do with it and how it can benefit us, we have to know how the system works. So he spent a considerable amount of time looking at exactly what is it the system can and cannot do. We've met very frequently with the people at Flock to try to get better understanding of like certain features and additional features that we don't have that we were contemplating acquiring if we could. But also making specific recommendations to them where we saw deficiencies or things that required improvement or things that were lacking completely that didn't exist that we thought should be audited. Mr. Walker got together with them and provided them with a list, very lengthy list of things, recommendations that we were making on how to make the system better, to which they seem to be very appreciative of. So
Gotcha.
we've been engaging in that kind of thing.
Good stuff. And there's another product too I wanted you to provide some clarity around as well. I don't know how to pronounce it, but the Peregrine?
Peregrine system.
Yeah, so what's the difference between Flock and Peregrine?
So the Flock is an actual system that does a specific thing, which is to actually take pictures of license plates, vehicles themselves, right, and provides feedback to the system. So if you enter a search looking for a specific plate and that vehicle has actually gotten in front of one of those cameras, then it will hit back and let you know. You'll get a response back saying, hey, it went in front of whatever the camera location was at whatever time and date it happened. The Peregrine system is something different, and I think maybe James might be the better. This is the reason why I hired James, because he's technical savvy, just so that you.
Okay.
I'm the policy writer. I'm the one who
fellow,
actually does the
fellow
internal
IT.
affairs investigation. But Peregrine is an entirely different system that will actually take existing systems that don't normally communicate with each other and glean that information, pull that information from all of them, so it's easier for us to extract the data that we need. But I think James could probably explain that more eloquently than I can.
Yeah, and I'm not super well versed in the system, so I don't want to pretend that I've looked into it a whole lot. But as I understand it, the whole goal is to aggregate data from multiple systems into a single location that makes it more usable and reportable. And so if you think about it, right now there are systems that take incoming calls for service, for like when you call 911. There are systems that have body cam footage. There are systems that have reports related to the use of force or other required reports that officers have to do. And these are all in different places and different systems and different functionalities, different ability to audit and report on them. Peregrine would effectively bring all those things together as best it can over time and give the police, as well as us as an oversight entity, a way to audit and look through data in a more comprehensive, collective manner. And so the goal of that is really just to make data easier to access and to use, to implement.
Gotcha. And so that, because that reminds me of a CBS report as well that came out that was saying that the chief was disconnecting from like a national system that would allow other jurisdictions to be able to share the city's information from their Flock camera. So is that where Peregrine comes into play, or?
Entirely different situation.
Okay.
So what the chief did was, in response to some community concerns that were expressed during a city council meeting, what he did was he eliminated sharing information. Well, from the very beginning, let me clarify something. From the very beginning, he was never sharing information with entities, law enforcement entities outside of the state of Virginia.
Okay.
So from the very beginning, he was only sharing within the state. However, after certain concerns were expressed at a recent, few weeks ago, at a city council meeting, he then stopped sharing information with everyone. So it was only being utilized locally.
Just for the department.
Correct.
Okay.
So at this time, just to provide more detail there, the only individuals who can actually search records on the 10 devices in the city of Charlottesville are Charlottesville city officers. And we also have access to the system. Other than us and the Charlottesville Police Department, nobody else can see any data related to those cameras.
And Ray's, you can come around here if you want to.
Yeah, Like I want to be the voice behind the curtain. All right, I said God's eye, so people that look at Fast and the Furious and whatnot kind of understand what you're actually saying, so I'm gonna talk in layman's terms. How many officers are there for the Charlottesville City Police Department?
I want to say approximately maybe 120.
120 is a round, rough estimate.
Okay, so let's say we're not talking about that. Do you know of 120 people that have your personal information?
Absolutely. Sad but true, yes. Yes.
What about you?
I would say yes, in terms of if they looked me up on social media or other things like that, they could know quite a bit about me.
And you know, I know everybody. So.
Right. my point being, right, is that the only pushback I see is that the police department is here to help and serve the community. But I don't, you know, everybody wants the police when a problem goes wrong, and everybody wants to be left alone when there isn't a problem, regardless of what your financial status is, where you live, whatever. But my only concern is that, okay, if you, as a person and a human being, we grow up around people, we kind of know what people are into, their family history and everything. You can't unsee what you know about a person. So if you know a family has a history of X, Y, Z, and you have the opportunity to look into where this person's location is, especially if you're trying to climb the ranks, then that leaves us with situations to where the PCOB has to be called in because somebody feels like they were done unjustly. And if I have access to a system, I kind of know how far to go with it. Like, so, I mean, because they're human beings, so I give that grace to say, okay, is everybody going to operate 100% within the lines? No. But the one time that it doesn't happen correctly, does it end up leaving somebody with a sheet on top of them because the situation escalated and it was never supposed to be that way? I was recently pulled over and I had just bought a new vehicle the other day, and a lady, one of the female officers told me that, you know, be careful when you leave from here because the traffic guys are going to be, you know, because it's been pinged, they're going to be looking and trying to, you know, this was what she told me. So that may or may not be true, but if that's her truth, think about it. If that's her truth, then when anybody comes in contact with her, that is the truth at that point in time, and then you have to have your day in court. And that's been the problem with our community, is being able to have an accurate day in court.
So again, a lot of incredibly valid points, and I think you are sort of, what you're saying resonates with a lot of people in the community. So I'm not going to be dismissive of what you're saying because it's very true. It's very real how the people feel. That people are paranoid these days, right? The advances that are happening with AI certainly don't help us as far as to allay those concerns that people have because it's advancing unbelievably rapidly. But as far as the system itself, speaking specifically about FLOC, I can't speak to any law enforcement agency other than the Charlottesville Police Department. The FLOC system doesn't, I think, necessarily work the way that most people think that it does. Can it be abused? Of course it can. I think that the legislation that's going into effect July 1st is going to go a very long way to not only regulate what we do here in Charlottesville, but it's going to regulate what law enforcement agencies do throughout the state as it pertains to FLOC. And it's one of the strictest legislations thus far that I've seen presented concerning this type of operating system. So in that sense, I think that the legislators may have been listening to the concerns from the community, or whatever their motivation was, they're certainly going in the right direction. Because remember, this was a completely unregulated technology before this state legislation takes effect July 1st. So there's that. Now, as far as pinging, let me say this to you, and this is a fact. No one in the Charlottesville Police Department is monitoring FLOC 24/7. They don't. They don't have the manpower to do that. So they don't use it for traffic regulation purposes. They don't issue it. They don't use it for traffic summons issuance. They only use it, and again, we can say that thus far they've only been using it that way because we actually conduct those audits, and Internal Affairs conducts audits. So not only are we conducting our own audits, but we're conducting audits of the audits being conducted by Internal Affairs. And the chief has been very serious about engaging in discipline when it comes to misuse of any of his systems. That hasn't happened with FLOC by the good grace of God, but he has, and I can't obviously get into specific discussions about administrative investigations of personnel, but he doesn't have a problem terminating people. I can tell you that. So that's something at least that's good news in that vein. But as far as FLOC, again, remember that the officer has to be engaging in a very specific search for a very specific reason that they are obligated to articulate. There's a specific section in the FLOC system where you have to enter, it's like a little narrative, a brief narrative of why you're doing this search. And if you don't have a justifiable reason for conducting that search, we're gonna see that where it's blank and we're like, wait a minute. And we have to cross-reference. So when Internal Affairs does a FLOC audit, for example, they're going to look at the search that was conducted by the officer. They're going to look at the case number associated with that, if there is one.
Mhm.
If there's not a case number, there should be like an event number or incident number that's generated from the ECC,
Mhm.
the Emergency Communications Center. And he then has to cross-reference that information with the LRMS system to see if there was an actual event that's consistent with that number that they provided to make sure that it was a legitimate search. The one good thing, again, about the state legislation is that's a requirement now statewide. It will become a requirement statewide that they cannot, in other words, they have to have reasonable articulable suspicion or probable cause for entering that information for engaging in that search. Let me say that. It's a very stringent requirement. The other thing is they now are going to be obligated to start reporting to the state police very specific criteria that's contained in that new law to the state police, and that so the local law, the state law takes effect July 1st. The reporting requirement takes effect April of next year, where they were all in the state are going to be obligated to report to the Pennsylvania State Police.
One quick question, Charles. So, just so I understand, the Charlottesville Police Department is separate from the state police, right?
That's correct.
So, when it comes to organizations like, for lack of a better term, SWAT, or when they're
our SWAT or their SWAT?
Or, well, that's what I'm saying. So, because to my understanding, a lot of these SWATs are combinations or different entities together. Like when we used to have, like, well, I think it was PD Task Force 9 or something like that they used to have.
So I don't know anything about that, but I will say to you that it's not unheard of for multiple organizations to engage in a joint law enforcement, whatever we want to call it, search, whatever. Together, they can do it individually, they can do it collectively, so that's not impossible. But again, I don't know how the whole flock information would tie into that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We were just over here talking on set.
That's why I need you to come over here with me. Give her her mic.
I'm just trying to get an accurate. A lot of things are pretty much, in my humble opinion, at the police's discretion. Especially when you're figuring out the new systems that you're implementing, right?
Correct.
So in that, I'm fearful that the public gets caught in the gray, because you have what the city administration or the state or the Senate or whoever is voting on the laws, right? But you also have where you say, okay, we're gonna do this as a trial basis. And anything that I've seen, in my past history, I was a criminal, right? I'm going to just say that, right? So I knew about blue light districts and Flock and Baltimore, all that type stuff, right? So I'm gonna cut to the chase. So I understood a lot of how to get around the camera system at one point in time, right? But I also understand that it was considered a war on drugs at that time. And nobody has lost that knowledge from the war on drugs, implementing it over to, let's say, we're looking for people who may not have citizenship, or people who have no license, or people who, they hear gunshot somewhere, or, and one of the worst things I think we got a little car that runs around here that sounds like it's backfiring, sounds like gunshots all the time, right? So if that sound is pinging all over the place, right? Then you have a system that's picking up inadequate things, trying to decipher, was it a fire? We got 4th of July coming. Was it a firecracker? Was it a gunshot? Was it this car? And in that, it seems like the community gets caught by the wayside, because then you have probable cause or suspicion, or, if they come up to me and, let's say, for instance, I'm just nervous because of the community I come from. And then the officer said, well, you look nervous. Well, I'm nervous because of your badge and your gun, or I may be trying to do right now, I might not quite got it together, child support might have suspended my life, and I'm going to work. Or there's so many situations that end up leading to probable cause or reasonable suspicion, or the gray area by which the system can implement its force. So knowing that, and knowing that a new system is getting put in, how would you suggest that the community interact in this situation?
All right, so you brought up a lot of very important points.
I've lived a lot.
Right, but multiple, right? So we could talk about this literally for like hours and hours.
Oh, Charles ain't gonna let that.
First of all, obviously, I'm never going to be dismissive of what it is the community feels about the police, and certainly officer discretion is a huge factor in a lot of what can go wrong, right? But I can tell you from the jurisdiction that I came from, we tried the zero tolerance policy approach because, again, we had a lot of complaints about the whole officer discretion thing, and we went to, okay, well, the only way to address officer discretion is to create a policy that removes their discretion. But that means that 100% of the time, whatever offense that you encounter, you are going to have to take a police action on. So imagine how many people that wouldn't get tickets previously would be getting tickets now because we didn't have the option not to. So again, you wouldn't be surprised to know that that maybe lasted all of 2 months before we went right back to how it was before.
We had a long discussion about
Yes,
this exact thing.
We
I
did.
remember.
And not just James and I, but I mean, we've had this discussion with previous boards, PCOB boards, because they didn't truly understand. Again, the whole officer discretion thing can go two ways. So yeah, it can be abused by a police officer, but at the same token, a police officer does have discretion not to do a thing to you. Sadly, in the environment that we currently find ourselves in nationwide, there's a lot going wrong in law enforcement, and it doesn't help that on a nationwide level, it seems like we're kind of like not holding people accountable even more now than we ever did before, which is very unfortunate. But what we have to do on a local level to try to allay the concerns that the people in our community have is to make sure that we constantly communicate with them facts. So we obligate the chief of police and the members of his department to engage in community outreach, to educate them on what it is we're doing and how we're doing it, to have the city council do the same thing, to be very just transparent about everything we're doing, because you brought up something about a car backfire being construed. That's an entirely different system, and I don't know if you know that it exists or not. That is not Flock. Flock will not pick up on things like that, but there is a system called ShotSpotter that actually does that very thing that you suggested. And it's like AI, right? It's up to the system to eventually learn as it hears more and more sounds to, decipher that this is a car backfire versus a firecracker versus an actual fire. Now, that didn't negate us having to respond regardless of where I came from, because we had it. But yeah, there's multiple systems, and I think it's important for us to educate the community on how each one of those systems work so that they understand. I don't think that anyone ever before has ever had the conversation with the community of that Flock is not monitored 24/7. It isn't. And for whatever concerns people may have with how their information is being utilized, which is a legitimate concern, know that despite the fact that we were initially unregulated, even when we were unregulated, the chief of police decided, because he was listening to the concerns of the community, to have a 7-day retention period for that information, and then it would be destroyed, right? So you wouldn't be able to access it after 7 days. The current state legislation has it at 21 days for everyone in the state. Despite that, the chief is keeping it here at 7 days. So despite the fact that the state law allows him to hold it for longer, he's still going to keep it at 7 days. So at least that's the last conversation that we had pertaining to that. The other issue is, yes, if I wanted to track you down easier than Flock, all I really need is this. A lot more information has been leaked out from companies that hold our healthcare information, that hold our credit card information. I mean, how many times have you guys got letters in the mail that your information was compromised, right? So happens a whole lot more, and it's already out there. It's in the dark web, and I'm not justifying that, because again, you're not wrong in what you're saying. Flock can be misused. It's up to us to make sure that we have the checks and balances in place to make sure that it's not abused, and if it is abused, that we hold the people that abuse it accountable. But I think, again, the state legislation is going to go a very long way in addressing that. But yeah, I think just educating the public on, just answer their questions openly. I'm trying to think of what else it is that you mentioned, because you mentioned so many really good points that I'm trying to make sure that I get everything in there.
That's good. I think
so. Thank you for that.
I mean, just to hit on some of those other if I'm good. So I used to work at a marketing company, digital marketing, and one of the interesting things and conversations there was about geolocating advertising to know if you have been in a specific store. Now, it doesn't track your name and that type of information, but it will know that this individual meets these criteria, this level of income, owns a home, but has this and that. And we know that we need to target this ad to this person because they went into Target on this date and they were shopping for these items.
Right.
And so that level of information exists and is there. And the question then is, okay, we're taking that type of information over into a law enforcement situation. And so all of a sudden the stakes become so much higher. People don't like it in the commercial realm as well.
Exactly.
But the key, I think, is educating, like you were saying, on what the system truly does and does not do, what type of information comes out of it, how it's being used, and the knowledge or the ability to say, James Walker did this in the system on this date at this time, he found this information, and here's what he did with it. And I do believe that the state legislation, as we know, because we've talked to Flock, is actually forcing them to make their auditing system more robust than it currently is, because they want to sell to a statewide law enforcement agencies, and so in order to do so, they are going to have to comply with that law, forcing them to change that system. And I've actually been pretty surprised at how willing they have been to sit down with us. We only have 10 cameras in the city of Charlottesville. It's not a big customer for them. However, they've been willing to sit down and talk to us and listen to us. And some of my perspective comes from education. I oversaw an IT department during the pandemic in a school system. So, we had to do a lot of monitoring of students, and there's major privacy concerns there. And so just understanding the systems that we used in education and trying to apply some of those principles over to law enforcement, I think is actually very valuable. And so that's some of the insight that I'm trying to hopefully provide to the company directly as well.
Yeah, and James, one of the things you mentioned earlier to make sure that we like close that question is that there are there is like sort of a mass surveillance that's happening sort of like across jurisdictions, meaning that there's people who can access the records of other jurisdictions that are like tied into the system, and so from my understanding is like, kudos to the Charlottesville Police Department for recognizing that and wanting people to feel like that at least their information was safe here. Like you said earlier, the city of Charlottesville department sees what the cameras captures, because there's been I want to say it was like Dallas, Texas or something that was able to find somebody in another area based on them being being under surveillance by a camera in another location. So there are some jurisdictions that are at least trying to cut that off so that they maintain their their own population, so to speak.
And I do want to clarify, right, because a lot of times when people hear the term surveillance, they think of a camera that's constantly recording. That's not what we have, right? So these cameras are not cameras that record constantly. They take snapshots so that we're clear. So there's still photos of the vehicles and plates that pass in front of them. So it's not constant surveillance. They wouldn't have honestly, financially, it would be burdensome to actually have the cameras. Now, do they exist? Yes, they do. They just don't exist here.
Right.
We don't have that here. But the other thing to consider, because again, I didn't want to leave here today without saying one thing. I do understand the concerns about all of this technology, and people are justified in having those concerns. I will not even remotely try to diminish it because I'm concerned. But at the same token, again, it's up to us to be responsible in terms of our auditing of these systems and holding our people accountable to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to do. But we also have to look at the positives, right? So for the people that, for example, say are paranoid or deeply critical of these types of systems, would you feel that way if you experience some of the things that some people here locally experience, where there was a homicide committed and the Flock system is what allowed the police department to apprehend the individual in question probably a lot more quicker than they would have had they not had the system, or the fact that there was a missing child and they were able to locate, utilizing the system, where that child was.
Right.
So there's a lot of good, or the two most recent shootings that we had in the downtown mall that were resolved also through utilizing the Flock system. So there are its benefits. So it's obviously a balance, and we have to strike. And I guess it's up to the community to decide, when you put it on the scale, like what's more important to you. Because again, if it happened to you, would you have wanted us to have that technology to be able to resolve that quicker? So it's a balance.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not disregarding anybody else's take or perception as well. But at the same time, I must say, and James, you know this from being IT as well, is that we tend to randomly sort of pick and choose what we get in an uproar about when there's already systems in play, like you were saying about the geolocation and stuff, right? It's like some of y'all may remember when people were talking about even like social media and like the political campaign using like certain feeds from social media, right? And things like that. So it's the same thing as like privacy. If we're honest about it, like privacy is at an all-time low.
Yes.
Right. And it's almost like just the fact that people don't think that their information isn't already being tracked, or even the fact that you have a cell phone in your pocket, that your location isn't being tracked. You know what I mean? So it's almost like that the Flock camera is sort of like a lightning rod. You know what I mean? Like that can be used to kind of be a fall guy and say this is going to be the epitome of a breach in privacy somehow, right? But if we really are, concerned about that, then I'm just saying we need to kind of take inventory of a lot of things that we are connected to, and realize like how much of our information and of our travel is actually being tracked on an everyday basis before the city had these cameras.
Right, and so we talk about the social media and their algorithms and how that was utilized to I guess sway the outcome of the actually the most recent elections, to be honest with you. But also, I'm an old school police captain, right, from Newark, New Jersey, and long before Flock and any of these things ever existed, if I wanted to find you, all I had to do was go to Verizon or whatever the carrier was and have them triangulate your location, and there it is. So again, we were tracking folks' movement long before. But even then, you had to have a reason for that. You had to have a search warrant for that, for those of us that were doing it the right way anyway.
I think the biggest, if I may, I kind of want to address the elephant in the city, so to speak, is that the problem with it is that, one, from my visual standpoint, and this is just the way I see it, the police force doesn't exactly match all of the community that they serve, like demographically. So then you always run it, especially here in Charlottesville, you run into people's racist ideologies and now having more power than just the badge and the gun. And I get worried when anybody tries to acknowledge that doesn't exist, or it's not a bigger problem, And I mean, because if you're honest with it, you say, yeah, it does exist, man. I mean, it's just people are people. People have different experiences. Just because they have this job doesn't mean that they lose how they feel about a situation.
But Razor, I got to say that to me, the only way, because I hear that a lot, the only way around that is if we're training and recruiting the future police officers from that actual city. Because sometimes people will say if it's white officers in a black neighborhood, well, we have black officers, and I see black officers in black neighborhoods. But a lot of times, just because you black doesn't necessarily mean that you understand the neighborhood.
Well, hold on, Charles. Also, one thing you got to realize is that because, let's say from the 80s on, there was such a target on putting felonies on black males that it's hard for them to first get their rights, then become an officer, and then all that. So we can't overshadow the fact of the hurdle exists right from the age of 15, 14, that the chance, they show that everybody gets in trouble at the same rate regardless of what your color is, but the prosecution rate is different. So then at that point, being excluded or being not able to become an officer is already put into, into your jacket. And on top of, if you had a father or uncle or family that did wrong, then you're starting to be looked at differently, especially if you grow up in an area that is high crime, because no man is in the house, mom is trying to raise me and multiple kids or whatever the situation is. So the deck is stacked. So even if we look in the city to make it, how many of those people, by the time they're able to go to the police force, are actually able to go to the police force?
And that's a legitimate concern, right? And so that's not just a local concern, but that's a nationwide concern too, and including the fact that just people applying for the police department is down nationwide. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they are being held accountable to a greater level than they were before, at least before this most recent election anyway. The body worn camera situation obviously is something that people consider. But I'm not even going to try to remotely dispel anything that Razor said. He's 100% correct about all of that. So it doesn't make it a little bit more challenging to try to recruit personnel to the agency that are representative of the community that the agency is hired to protect, right? So that is a legitimate challenge. With the Charlottesville Police Department, when the chief came in initially, they were already down, about 33 at least, I think. At least 30 police officers they were down. He has actually made a full court press to try to recruit individuals, and yes, he has had to go extended outside of the city of Charlottesville to the state, to the country, to try to get the people he's looking for. But he has done, I think, a pretty decent job in trying to recruit people of color, women, a little bit more representative. But to your point, I think it's also true that the trade-off there is that they don't necessarily immediately know the community that they're serving. So that could be problematic. But of greater concern, and I'm not trying to stir up the hornet's nest or anything like that, is I have to ask also the question, the racism that we're talking about does not just happen. I think you alluded to that. It doesn't just happen in predominantly white police departments. I came from an organization that was very representative of the community, and yet we still had a lot of that going on. We still had a lot of the challenges that Rafe talked about as far as, men of color being targeted at a higher rate than anybody else, and the prosecution certainly was significantly different when it came to men of color versus white men. So that's a very real thing, and I honestly don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know how to resolve it, because a lot of these places where this is happening are controlled by individuals who are in charge of those cities that are people of color. So why is it still happening?
And my answer to that would be it's the representation, or like it's the it's the relationship. I think it's mainly the relationship, because even here, while we have demographics, of young men of color who get caught up in the system at an early age, we still have a very high, graduation rate as well. And we have plenty going off to college and all that good stuff as well. But even those qualified individuals still probably don't want to be police officers. You see what I'm saying? So it's not just that it's because they may have a criminal record or whatever the case is. I think in general, we still have a lot of work to do when it comes to improving a relationship, right? Between the police and different communities. And once again, being a police officer something that a young black or brown kid wants to aspire to be, right? Because I think right now the majority of them have a negative take or view of law enforcement in general. I think that's a big part of it. But we do have a question that came in as well, and it says, let's say that they don't have RAS, like you mentioned, is required, or even thought that they did and was entered into the system to help locate, and so I guess the question is, could that backfire and put a target on the wrong person? And what are the checks and balances to correct that, to make sure that it's corrected in the citizens' favor and to respect their rights? So if I'm understanding that correctly, you may catch a tag or a car or whatnot, and but it maybe it's registered to a different person or whatever the case is. So what are the checks and balances there to make sure that it's working in the citizens' favor?
All right, so I'm not going to suggest that mistakes can't happen, right? They can always happen, so it all depends. But I can tell you what the policy says, right? So the policy requires the police officer. It's not enough for us to get an alert on a plate. So if a police officer responds to an alert associated with a flock, and they pull a vehicle over, they must first independently verify that all the information is correct before they even pull that individual over. So there's some checks and balances that are built into the existing policy, even before the state law takes effect, that is supposed to prevent that. So they are supposed to independently verify information before they take a police action.
Okay.
And I'll speak to just one other element of that is one of the initial, how do we get an alert to begin with? Well, there's two functions inside the system. One is a search, where I can just enter information at will. I could enter a plate number, I could enter a vehicle make and model with color, things like that, and that requires the reason and case number or incident number, and we can tag that directly to the user that put that information in. There's another side to the system that allows for a hot list to be created. Now, there are national hot lists, there are state hot lists, and these hot lists would be specific to a thing like stolen vehicles or stolen plates, warrant out for arrest, a specific investigation, maybe on a homicide. They create a hot list specifically because there were 4 or 5 vehicles in the area and they just want to track those 4, right?
Missing
individuals, another one. And so those hot lists, we can also see who created them, when they created them, and those also require reasons to create the list to begin with. Then that list takes effect where the system is cross-referencing against that list on a constant rotating basis. But we can see every action that is taken with that list, what's added, when it's added, who added it, and why. So just understanding that dual aspect of the system is important too.
Okay, on that hot list, you named the big 4, but does that hot list become created for dead tags or driver inspection or driver's license or anything like that?
Absolutely not. So there is no DMV related information. So in other words, we're not sharing information with DMV. DMV is not sharing information with us, and when I say us, with the system. So no, it is not for purposes of issuing summonses, finding out who's registered, not registered, insured, not insured. That is not what Flock is for.
Okay.
And it's not how it's used, at least not in the city of Charlottesville, it's not.
Okay. Another question that came in is violating the Fourth Amendment rights. Like, has this come up from any citizens that feel like that they're in violation?
What is the Fourth Amendment?
So in particular, the question that came through is
Search and seizure.
Yeah, and in particular, the question is about being able to collect data or track a vehicle without a warrant. Like, so does the need for a warrant versus like someone's privacy, as far as their personal possessions, like how does that come into play with the cameras?
So that's an excellent question, right? So if you have a criminal investigation that happens as a result of, say, a shooting that transpired, right? So now, once the police are provided, let's say, with a suspect automobile, this is a description. If they have a plate, they get the plate. They enter it into the system, and now let's say it alerts. All right, they respond to the location where this vehicle supposedly is. They independently verify that this is the information, that we put in. This is in fact the vehicle we're looking for. That is their actual legal justification for pulling that vehicle over. However, searching that vehicle is an entirely different situation that in all likelihood will require the police department to get a search warrant. But every circumstance is different. Remember, the circumstances and the actions of the individuals will determine like what level they have to go to next. So if there's something that occurs independently while that same motor vehicle stop happens that gives the officers what they need at the moment, say, to justify an additional search of that vehicle, then they can. So it varies, but just based solely on that information with no other extenuating circumstances, then yeah, they would likely get a search warrant to be able to take that further.
Gotcha. Awesome. I think we are joined by James Inez of the Charlottesville Police Civilian Oversight Board. And I know one of the thing that we had come up that the listeners wanted us to address is as far as what's going on right now with immigration in general, because again, like that, there has been some stories around the country of where there's at least a discussion of whether or not flock cameras are being used, for that as well, like to try to spot like some undocumented residents and whatnot. So from the oversight board's view, and being that that's a hot topic right now, kind of give us the highlights, right, or like the overview of how you all's board and your department is involved with making sure that the citizens' rights are protected, like when it comes to things like this. And even if when there's times of even like ICE agents being in the area, like is there oversight for that? Like what power does the city have when it comes to the interactions of the community and deportation right now?
So let me answer the easiest question first, right? So as it pertains to agencies outside of the city of Charlottesville, the Police Civilian Oversight Board has absolutely zero jurisdiction. We can do nothing about it. If, for example, ICE agents engage in conduct that's whatever inappropriate or illegal or whatever, and people want to bring it to our attention, there's nothing we can do about that. We are solely responsible for the Charlottesville Police Department. As far as the immigration-related information, our agencies throughout the country cooperating with ICE agents in terms of searches specific to immigration? Yes, they are. I can tell you that is, you're right, it is a huge concern in the city of Charlottesville. Residents have at city council meetings brought it to the attention of the council what their concerns are, and as a direct result of that, what I wound up doing is I asked James to, right after that council meeting, I asked James to do an audit right now to see whether or not anyone from within the state is engaging in searches of our system specific to immigration-related searches, to which we learned that yes, they were. So as soon as we saw that, we brought it to the chief's attention immediately. He then asked James to engage in a search from January 1st to current, which was
like
mid-June,
June 6th or something.
Somewhere thereabouts. So we engaged in the search for the chief and learned that there were, and mind you, it wasn't a large-scale situation.
It's about 70, I believe. That now, mind you, we're relying on what another agency typed into the reason box, right? So we have no way to validate or verify that. We can only verify or validate what's inside of our own department, right?
So there were some agencies that did in fact put the
immigration, ICE,
right?
Those types of.
But then, of course, you've got agencies in the state that weren't putting any information at all in the boxes where they were required to.
Sometimes I've seen ones like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as the reason put in.
Or they would put the initials of the organization. So we can't control what other entities do. But I can tell you this: just as soon as we brought to the chief's attention that was being done, he asked James to conduct that broader search starting from January 1st. And when he saw that it was in fact being utilized, he ceased all sharing with everyone else in the state.
Mhm.
Now, of course, the ramification of that is we don't get anything back either, so we are limited. So the use of our 10 cameras is just by us. We won't get information from outside of the state. So if we were looking, say, for a suspect vehicle and it went outside of the scope of our cameras, outside of our jurisdiction, then we wouldn't be getting information on that. Not in the traditional way, not in the way like through Flock. We would have to do something different, like enter the information into the state, like NCIC and the state system. And let's say, for example, that it passed in front of another vehicle and they caught it and pulled it over for that reason, then of course they would notify us that they had that vehicle. But yeah, not through the use of the camera system, because again, we shut off all communication with other jurisdictions.
And I would say, I mean, this is one of the benefits of the state legislation, because it does help standardize that process, and it puts the state police in the role of being the kind of the arbiter of that data back and forth to the localities. So there is going to be some standardization at the state level, and that helps. But I do actually, I think from the recent talk with Flock, we do still have access to some cameras out there in maybe not in the Commonwealth, but there are some, and I would have to dive into the system a little bit more. But currently, there is not a single entity, state, federal, whatever, that can look at our cameras. So that is true. That has been entirely cut off. But there are still some that we can access, although to your point, we have been removed being able to see into those other systems by quite a few. So.
Thank you for that info. So maybe lastly, because I think people understand the board and what it does, but as far as the lines of communication from the community, right? Because I think with the PCOB, like a big perception is that the community sees it as really like what the name says, right? Like the oversight for the police. So if someone has an issue with our local police department, are there channels to where like they could address it through the PCOB, or what would that channel be? Because that may be a myth that needs to be dispelled, but that's what some people think that the intent of it is that like this is the voice that if civilians have an issue with the police, then this is the board that represents them. So can you, what clarity can you provide around that?
That's hot topic and I don't know, loaded question, right?
Yes, it is.
So, theoretically, the answer is yes, right? You are supposed to be able to come to us if you have concerns about the police department, and if you don't want them to investigate that complaint, you are supposed to be able to come to us, and we are supposed to be able to engage in that investigation. Theoretically, the answer is yes, right? So if I had the time and the personnel to engage in investigations, then yes, that would be the case. The board itself, on paper, the law says that yes. Do they have the bandwidth to do that? And that's the question. They do not. You have to look at the board meets once a month. And in reality, the local ordinance only requires them to meet once quarterly. So if they were actually meeting once quarterly, imagine how much time they would have or not have to engage in investigations. Investigations are very time-consuming things, and I don't think people have a true understanding and appreciation of what is it that goes into an investigation. This isn't CSI Miami. This isn't all these TV shows where they resolve the issue in like 30 minutes or 45 minutes of definitely commercials, right? It doesn't happen that way, and a lot of the tools that they use on TV are not real. And so it's very time consuming. You're talking about you'd have to, speak to everyone, including the individual who made the complaint, any additional witnesses. You have to attempt to locate independent witnesses. You're going to have to speak to police officers, and you have to have the legal ability to speak to police officers, for example, which the board doesn't have. They can speak to the board voluntarily, but the board cannot compel police officers to cooperate. And that's a protection that's offered as a result of the Garrity versus the state of New Jersey, because if they do speak voluntarily, anything that they say can be used against them anywhere. Criminal courts, civil court, and administrative investigations as well, for the purposes of discipline. So you have to be an employee of the city to actually compel another employee to speak to you as it pertains to administrative investigations of personnel. But again, very time-consuming processes. You have to look at video footage. So let me give you a perfect example of, let's say, an incident involving a motor vehicle stop where you had multiple officers responding. Let's say it was a high-risk stop. And let's just say the entire interactions from start to finish was, let's say, an hour, and you had 6 police officers respond. We can't fast forward through that video evidence. We have to look at it. So if it's six police officers and 6 hours worth of information, that is we have to look at each and every one of those videos So it's a time, we could literally take an entire day just looking at video footage.
And there could be witness video that is provided as well, so that could add.
Right, because the goal is to also try to find independent video, independent of the police camera. So you want to go to the location, see if there's any cameras at that location. So it takes time. That's not something that's within the capacity of this current board. They just can't do it. Most of these people have full-time employment. These are professionals. We have, we had 3 attorneys, a clinician, a psychologist. So these are people, a professor. Full-time professor. So they don't actually have the time to devote to a full-blown investigation. So theoretically, the answer is yes. Does the ordinance say that they can? Sure. Can they really do it in practice? No. No. That would have to.
Is that a goal?
That would fall on us.
Yeah, I mean, but is that a goal to be able to outfit it?
It's
to be able to have that capacity?
Again, I think that's up to the council and the people that I answer to, up to the community. I can tell you that if this is what they want, and I think part of the problem, if I'm being really honest about in the 2 years that I've been here, what I believe was the issue is that when they put that ordinance together, the individuals that did, they had very good intentions. But if you're pulling information from other jurisdictions, you don't necessarily understand whether or not it's applicable in our own jurisdiction, because we have our own laws that we have to comply with. So I think when they were pulling all this information together, they did not realize that you're pulling this information from ordinances that existed for full-time boards that were paid by the jurisdictions that appointed them. And so ours is not a full-time board. They're also not compensated, right? They can't be compensated because there's actually state-level legislation that prohibits them from being compensated, because only boards that are considered advisory boards can be, right? The municipality has the option to pay them. It's not mandatory, but it's optional. And so they don't fall into the category of advisory. So if the community wanted them to be able to do all the things that are listed in the ordinance, then the reality is you would need a full-time board. Now, whether it's a full-time board of volunteers that don't care about being paid, or ones that want to be paid, it still has to be a full-time board, because what's required of them is a lot. It's just an absolute lot.
Okay.
Hey, Charles, let me ask this real quick. All right, so let's say we go ahead of that. Let's say that the community is trying to not even have to deal with the PCOB. There was a let's just say, for instance, let's go back a few years ago when there were some issues with police stops, and some people were saying that the problem was that the community wasn't complying, right? Like that was a thing that when people, I'm gonna just say people of color were complaining that, police were going too far in situations like this. People who were in support of the blue, would say, well, you're not complying to what the officer said, right? So if we go back, instead of talking about putting a Band-Aid on the situation, talk to the PCOB, talk to the police department, saying I was unjustly done, whatever. How would either one of you suggest that when a stop takes place, you don't know if it's flock, you don't know if you made a lane change, you don't know, whatever the reason is, what would you two suggest people's interaction be with the police officer, especially if you feel like you're not being given the correct information as to why the stop is taking place?
Again, loaded question. I don't know that there's any one solution, right? So I could sit here and say that if you fully comply, and it's interesting because James and I were asked recently by the Office of Human Rights to look at a pamphlet that they actually created that they want to distribute and have been in the past distributing to the community about know your rights when you engage a police officer. And I can tell you that if you followed every one of those recommendations, that you won't have an issue, but we all know that's not true, right? We all know that you can be 100% cooperative and still have an issue, and that is the unfortunate reality of the situation here in this country. It is what it is. So you have good cops, you have bad cops. I'm not even going to try to sugarcoat that.
Right.
I still like to believe in my heart that we still have more good ones than bad ones. Again, that's what I'd like to believe, right? So I don't know. And it hurts me to say that because having been a retired police officer who all my life wanted to do what was right, it does hurt to see when they're not doing the right thing, and it hurts good cops out there, right? It hurts the reputations of good cops who are actually trying to do the right thing. But would I always recommend that you cooperate 100%? Yes. If the police officer doesn't tell you why they're pulling you over, and they should, right? And we have a policy in the city of Charlottesville that dictates them. We recommend that you take the following actions whenever you engage in a motor vehicle stop, which includes telling the individual why you pulled them over, introducing yourself. I am Officer Inez Gonzalez from the Charlottesville Police Department, and the reason I pulled you over was this, right? That's theoretically how it should happen. If it doesn't happen, however, I don't think that that's the time to argue. If you feel that your rights are being violated, I don't believe that that is the time to fight. I'm not saying that you shouldn't make a complaint. I think what you should do is make as many observations as you possibly can. Document mentally, or even ask, hey, listen, after it's all said and done, can I get your name and badge number? Now, 9 times out of 10, all you have to do is look, because I'm not going to suggest to you that there hasn't been instances when a person asks for the name and badge number where it only makes the police officer more irate. I haven't seen that here by the good grace of God, but I know that it happens. So my suggestion is take as many notes as you possibly can, but fully cooperate. If they want your credentials, then show them your credentials, even if you don't think you did anything wrong, and then file a complaint afterward. Right, and then make an issue out of it afterward. Pursue it immediately after it happens, because remember, we're fighting against sometimes retention periods. So we've had individuals that come to our office, 3, 4, 5, 6 months after the fact, because they had an epiphany on all of a sudden now they want to file a complaint, and it's very difficult for us to now then backtrack to try to find the video information that we need in support of, or to even say that a motor vehicle stop occurred and the officer maybe didn't have their camera on, which is a violation, by the way, because officers, when they interact with the police, with the citizens, are supposed to have their cameras going. The reason is to dispel any concerns that anybody might have about what actions they did or did not take. So that's an extra check and balance that's necessary, and I'm one of those advocates that will tell you that when a citizen police encounter occurs and the officer didn't document it through their body cam, I have a huge problem with that. That's a big bone of contention for me, because again, then I hate to say it, but I make the assumption that either you willfully didn't do it, or you know what I mean. I hate to cast aspersions, but I don't care for it.
But also, reporting something like that in the form of a complaint can also help to establish a pattern of practice. If there's a specific officer who doesn't turn that camera on a frequent basis and is then engaging in some sort of misconduct, by reporting that as a complaint, we're going to start to see the pattern of this officer is not turning this camera on. And discipline is progressive. So as an incident is occurring repetitively, that helps establish that pattern of practice to that officer. That's important.
Yeah. So so Inez, over there.
The bad part, I know we got to wrap up, but the bad part about that is that, and I have to say this, is that the grace that you're talking about for like developing a pattern doesn't always roll over to the community, and then sometimes you might not get your day in court. So I hear what you're saying, but it's unfair that it's looked upon one way and judged on another.
Yeah. Live to play another day, as they say. Play it smart. But before we let you go, thank y'all for joining us, and definitely gotta have you back. You've been here before. I gotta have you back, James.
Appreciate it.
Because of course this is an ongoing conversation, right? And so, but as we let you go, make sure folks know how to get in touch with your office if they need to inquire.
So the phone number is 434-970-3794.
Or the email is the easy one, pcob@charlottesville.gov. pcob@charlottesville.gov. We also have a page on the City of Charlottesville website. We're under the Departments tab, as well as our office is right there downtown in the Market Street parking garage. We're right there along the side of the garage near City Space.
The upper level, right?
Upper, yep.
Gotcha. Well, thank you all, and thank you, IMHO family. Till next time.
Great job, y'all. That's
was
the
wondering
first
if you were
time
gonna
meeting.
join us.
Yeah, you know I wasn't gonna be.
That was awesome.
I was waiting on Max to get. Max was supposed to meet me at 2.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.